As 2015 came to a close, Angela Diaz was filled with hope. At 30 years old, her life seemed to be on track. She was confident, optimistic, and ready for a fresh start. She had recently met someone new online, and this connection felt different. His name was Ian Diaz, a 38-year-old U.S. Marshal. Their conversations quickly progressed from lighthearted to deep and meaningful. There was undeniable chemistry between them. The two met in person on January 2, 2016. From that moment, their relationship progressed quickly. Within weeks, Angela and Ian grew closer, moved in together, and soon got engaged. They married not long after and seemed happy, deeply in love, and focused on building a future together. Shortly after their wedding, Angela found out she was pregnant with twins, which made her feel as if all her dreams were coming true. Angela worked at a law firm, while Ian had built a stable career in law enforcement. Living in Anaheim, California, their life appeared perfect on the outside. However, that perfect image fell apart just months later. On the night of June 24, 2016, Angela came home as usual. She parked her car in the garage, but as she stepped out, a stranger suddenly appeared. Without warning, he charged at her. Angela fell to the ground, screaming in terror and trying to shield herself. Although she managed to escape serious injury, she was left shaken, bruised, and with her blouse torn. What scared Angela most wasn't the physical assault but the realization that the attack seemed premeditated. Someone had deliberately targeted her. She immediately called the police, already suspecting who might be behind it. While she didn't recognize her attacker, she believed she knew who had orchestrated the assault. For weeks leading up to the attack, Angela had been receiving disturbing anonymous emails. These messages were filled with threats, religious references, and violent language. The harassment allegedly started on May 29, when Angela received an email stating that the sender hoped she was scared of the following day. The sender referred to herself as his princess, insulted Angela by calling her nothing, and warned her to watch her back. Shortly after, another message, written entirely in capital letters, was allegedly sent via LinkedIn, stating that Michelle was his one and only true love and that Angela was nothing to him. Michelle Hadley was Ian's ex-girlfriend. Their relationship had ended badly, marred by emotional fights and unresolved financial disputes. They had purchased a condo together and shared a mortgage, but their breakup had left them entangled in a bitter struggle over the property. At some point, Ian began receiving strange emails from Michelle as well. These messages, which initially expressed anger, gradually became more alarming. They contained religious imagery and threats, which unsettled Ian. He forwarded the emails to the police and his colleagues in law enforcement. He even applied for a restraining order against Michelle, citing her emotional instability and previous outbursts, but his request was denied. When Angela began receiving similar threats, she and Ian were convinced Michelle was responsible. Angela took legal action and applied for her own restraining order. She explained that she had never responded to the harassment, had blocked each email address, yet the messages kept coming from new accounts. On June 1, 2016, the court granted Michelle a restraining order, prohibiting her from contacting or having contact with Angela as required by law. Michelle was notified of the order via email. Afterward, law enforcement began treating the case more seriously. Just days later, officers went to Michelle's home to serve the restraining order in person, outlining the legal boundaries she now had to follow. For Angela and Ian, it felt like progress had finally been made. They allowed themselves a moment of relief, hoping that the harassment would finally stop. But their sense of safety was short-lived. About a week later, Angela and Ian's peace was abruptly disrupted by a knock on their door. When they opened it, they found a stranger standing outside. The man appeared calm, yet there was something unsettling about him. He said he came to see Angela, saying he was invited to help satisfy her deepest desires. Confused and alarmed, Angela and Ian listened as the man explained that he had responded to a Craigslist ad. The ad described a specific role-play scenario designed to resemble a violent, non-consensual encounter, though it suggested Angela would secretly welcome it. Horrified, Angela and Ian told the man that he was mistaken. He apologized and left, but the damage was already done. Someone had used Angela's identity online to post the ad, inviting strangers into her home, and the situation was far from over. Later that evening, while they were in their garage, things took a terrifying turn. Another man showed up at their home, but this time, he didn't knock or try to explain himself. Instead, he immediately lunged at Angela, as though following explicit instructions. She managed to escape unharmed, but the attack left her deeply shaken. Shortly after, the ad responsible for the incidents was discovered. It had been posted using Angela's name, photo, and home address. The post instructed men to go to her house and warn them that she might resist, but they were to proceed anyway. The ad was horrifying, violating Angela's privacy and putting her life, and the lives of her unborn twins, in grave danger. In the days that followed, more men came forward. Some had responded to similar ads but backed away once they realized the situation was real. Others, however, had arrived ready to act on what they believed to be a fantasy. Ian was furious. Being continuously harassed, receiving threats of violence, and facing indifference from authorities pushed him into a state of despair. He publicly voiced his anger, demanding that Michelle, the person he believed responsible, be arrested and jailed immediately. Eventually, law enforcement took action. After the garage attack, investigators obtained a warrant and arrested Michelle. Her devices, including her phone, laptop, and iPad, were seized for examination. Although her family posted bail and secured her release, the harassment continued. Angela received more threatening messages, and strangers kept showing up at her house. From the beginning, Michelle denied any involvement. When she was first informed about the restraining order, she expressed confusion, insisting she had never spoken to Angela and had nothing to do with the threats, emails, or Craigslist ads. Michelle claimed she was being impersonated and even revealed that she had received unusual messages herself. However, investigators dismissed her claims, convinced that she was the perpetrator. Then, another incident occurred. A 17-year-old boy showed up at Angela's house after responding to an online ad. Fortunately, Angela saw him before anything could happen and immediately called the police. The boy explained he thought he was answering an invitation similar to the earlier posts and had no idea the person in the photos wasn't the one who created them. The next day, on July 14th, Michelle was arrested again. This time, the case was treated with much greater urgency. Prosecutors described her as a threat to public safety, and her bail was set at $1 million. The charges against her were severe. Not only had Angela endured repeated threats and attacks, but her pregnancy with twins made the situation even more dire. Michelle's family was devastated. They believed in her innocence but didn't have the financial means to continue paying for her release. Michelle chose to remain in custody, putting her remaining resources toward her legal defense. Due to the seriousness of the case, Michelle was held in a high-security unit under strict monitoring. While she had not physically harmed Angela, authorities were convinced she had orchestrated the attacks, making her a dangerous individual. The weeks that followed were brutal. Inside jail, Michelle was treated with suspicion and contempt. Other inmates saw her as a snitch or an informant. She was targeted, harassed, and routinely assigned the worst jobs, scrubbing toilets, cleaning filthy corners, and enduring verbal abuse from both inmates and staff. The harsh environment was a far cry from the structured academic life she had always known. Michelle had grown up in Ontario, California, raised in a conservative household. Her parents owned a small business and instilled in her traditional values. She wasn't drawn to parties or attention. Instead, she found comfort in books and quiet places. Her passion was medieval history, and she eventually earned a degree in the field, devoting herself to studying the intricacies of the Middle Ages. At 22, she married her high school sweetheart, but the relationship didn't last. By the time she turned 26, they had divorced. It was after that, in 2011, that Michelle met Ian Diaz, 6 years her senior. The two connected on a dating website, exchanged a few messages, and eventually met for coffee. Ian was charming, well-spoken, and quickly became enamored with Michelle. His friends would later describe her as the ideal partner. brilliant, beautiful, and grounded. Ian told everyone she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Their relationship progressed quickly. In late 2014, Ian proposed during a trip to New York. They began planning a wedding for February 2016. In the meantime, they adopted a dog and began looking for a place to live. Eventually, they settled on a unit in a brand new complex in Anaheim's Southern District. The apartment cost just under $469,000. Michelle paid a $14,000 down payment, and together they applied for a loan to cover the rest. From the outside, their life looked idyllic. But behind closed doors, the cracks were already forming. Ian slowly began to assert control. At first, it was subtle. Michelle worked in the marketing department of a large insurance company, but Ian insisted the job was too stressful. He persuaded her to leave, offering instead to help her land a position as a project manager at Disneyland, where he had connections. He began encouraging Michelle to change her appearance: more makeup, tighter clothes, longer nails. He wanted her to get a belly button piercing. He bought her a new phone, tablet, and laptop under the pretense of generosity. Though Michelle later suspected he used them to track her, he called constantly, demanded updates on her whereabouts, and interrupted her sleep regularly with demands for attention. When Michelle decided to pursue a Master of Business Administration, Ian was unhappy and insisted on studying with her. When he was unable to do so, he began to make things difficult for her, leading to arguments, delays, and even disruptions to her study schedule. As time passed, Ian's expectations became more disturbing. He forces Michelle to engage in intimate acts that she finds extremely uncomfortable, specifically being with another man while he watches. Michelle refused. She made it clear she wouldn't tolerate those demands. She warned Ian that if he continued pressuring her, the relationship would not survive. But Ian dismissed her concerns, claiming she was exaggerating. At work, she regularly received explicit messages from him, including links to adult videos, often while she was in meetings or working. Then came Valentine's Day 2014. Michelle was sick that evening, battling a cold and taking medication. Ian began pressuring her again, insisting she fulfill one of his fantasies. Drained and desperate to end the conversation, Michelle gave in. What followed left a lasting scar. Ian posted an ad on Craigslist inviting a stranger to their home. He mixed Michelle 3 strong drinks despite knowing she was unwell and medicated. Then, as the stranger arrived, Ian set up a hidden camera and retreated to the bathroom, watching from behind a closed door. The next morning, Michelle was devastated. She told Ian that she felt used, violated, and ashamed. She begged him to delete the footage. Ian, unmoved, insisted that everything had been consensual. Their relationship spiraled from there. After one heated argument, Ian pulled the car over in the middle of a busy road and forced Michelle to get out because she hadn't, in his words, shown him respect. They tried therapy, but it failed after one session. When Michelle brought up the traumatic Valentine's incident, Ian exploded. He became so enraged that he drove recklessly around the city, refusing to let her out of the vehicle. He threatened to crash the car and kill them both. Michelle was trapped in a relationship that looked safe from the outside, but was deeply toxic, invasive, and emotionally abusive from within. By August 2015, Michelle had reached her breaking point. The constant pressure, fear, and manipulation from Ian had become unbearable, and she decided to leave. He responded with brutal revenge. He destroyed her belongings, canceled her car insurance, and sent threatening messages that his friends might come to her work, school, or home. Despite the threats, Michelle tried to start over. She found a new job, re-enrolled in school, and tried to rebuild her life. One unresolved issue was the apartment they had purchased together. Both their names were on the mortgage, and a legal resolution was required. In November 2015, they reached an agreement. Ian would pay Michelle $3,000 and assume full responsibility for the mortgage by June 5, 2016. If he failed to meet these terms, the apartment would be sold, and the proceeds split. However, none of this was disclosed to the Anaheim Police Department, not to the detectives, prosecutors, or officers handling the harassment investigation. Michelle was later jailed for more than 2.5 months. Frustrated and desperate for answers, her family began reviewing the evidence themselves. They discovered troubling inconsistencies in the timeline. Emails attributed to Michelle had been sent while she was either in class or hospitalized. The timestamps didn't align with her whereabouts. Then, the story took a shocking twist. Ian, the same man whose testimony had helped build the case against Michelle, came forward with a confession. Ian told police he now believed Michelle was innocent and that his current wife, Angela Diaz, had orchestrated the entire scheme. He admitted that one of the threatening emails tied to Michelle was sent from an account he had created. While he claimed he hadn't sent the message himself, he suspected Angela had used the account without his knowledge. Ian also revealed that Angela had lied to him about being pregnant. The ultrasound images she had shown him were fake, purchased on Etsy, where such items can be customized. Angela's deceit didn't end there. She had also falsely claimed to be a licensed attorney and a law school graduate, neither of which was true. More disturbing details about her past began to surface. Angela's ex-boyfriend Jason, a police officer, had been tricked into believing she had cervical cancer. Angela moved in with Jason and his son, even shaving her head and taking pictures at clinics to fake her lies. Yet, she showed none of the physical symptoms of chemotherapy. She drank wine, maintained her weight, and continued her normal lifestyle. Jason eventually grew suspicious. A friend followed Angela on a day she claimed to have a doctor's appointment, only to discover she never left the house. Jason reverse-searched one of the photos she had sent him and found it was taken from the internet. When confronted, Angela refused to provide medical documentation or show a port catheter, which is typical for cancer patients undergoing chemotherapy. It was then that the truth unraveled. Angela did not have cancer. Jason ended the relationship. Back in Anaheim, authorities executed a search warrant and seized Angela's phone and laptop. The evidence they uncovered was damning. On January 6, 2017, Angela was charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, forgery, perjury, theft, and filing false police reports. The case against Michelle collapsed completely, as Angela used a VPN to send threatening emails and impersonated Michelle multiple times to cover her tracks. While the police investigated, the damage was already done. The alleged garage attack, a key aspect of Angela's claims, never happened. Home surveillance footage showed no intruder on the night in question. It appeared Angela had injured herself to fabricate the story, but the police failed to review the footage during their initial investigation. Throughout the investigation, Angela maintained her innocence, even smiling during the process. Eventually, she accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt and receiving a 5-year prison sentence, a surprisingly lenient punishment considering Michelle had nearly faced life imprisonment. Angela is now free and has since divorced Ian. Michelle was fully exonerated only after Angela's conviction. Even then, the moment felt bittersweet. The district attorney's office delayed issuing a public acknowledgement, forcing Michelle to demand that they disclose the truth or risk exposure. A press conference was eventually held, during which officials admitted to the miscarriage of justice, praised the investigation, and officially classified Michelle as the victim of a calculated scheme. From the very beginning, Michelle had been cooperative, repeatedly warning authorities that someone was impersonating her. She made daily calls to the police, urging them to trace the IP addresses behind the emails, but her pleas were ignored. She also flagged fraudulent Craigslist ads that Angela had posted and begged for their removal, only to be met with persistent failures by the system. Even after Angela confessed, Michelle remained convinced that Ian had played a role. Michelle's arrest coincided suspiciously with the same week Ian failed to meet court requirements to take over the apartment mortgage. Investigators eventually linked many of the threatening emails and Craigslist ads to IP addresses from Ian and Angela's home. Not only had Angela used the home network, but Ian had as well. Ian sent some of the incriminating messages using his work phone, personal phone, and laptop. Once their plan unraveled, Ian attempted to shift the blame entirely onto Angela. He changed his phone number, deleted email accounts, and tried to portray himself as a whistleblower. However, these actions failed to clear his name. Ian Diaz was ultimately charged with cyberstalking, conspiracy, perjury, and obstruction of justice. In 2023, he was sentenced to 10 years and 1 month in federal prison. In 2018, Michelle filed a federal lawsuit against Ian, Angela, the city of Anaheim, and the Anaheim Police Department, accusing them of false imprisonment and civil rights violations. By 2021, the lawsuit was settled for undisclosed terms. Today, Michelle has rebuilt her life. She completed a master's degree in business administration, began her career in the marketing industry, started her own business, and moved to New York, leaving behind her past in California. Recently, she welcomed her first child, a daughter. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellie Nessler. In the small town of Jamestown, California, Daniel Mark Driver was on trial for child abuse. One of Daniel's victims was William Nelair, a defenseless child. William's mother, Ellie, felt that the justice system had failed to protect her son, so Ellie took matters into her own hands with a gun. The case sparked widespread debate, with some people fully supporting Ellie, while others criticized her actions. Ultimately, the discussion surrounding the case attracted national attention. Jamestown was a small, quiet town with a population of about 3,500 at the time of the incident. Ellie was the eldest of 3 daughters. Her parents were hardworking miners who taught Ellie the importance of self-reliance from a young age. As a result, she grew up to be strong and independent. During her teenage years, Ellie began to help her family by looking for work. It was a tough economic time. She took on various jobs to supplement her income. She also helped her parents by taking care of her younger siblings. When Ellie turned 20, she fell in love with a guy she met, and they quickly entered a romantic relationship. Soon after, they got married, but their marriage ended in divorce shortly thereafter. Her next partner was Bill, who worked as a miner. Additionally, Bill operated construction equipment, allowing him to earn a good income. They married in 1982 and soon welcomed a son named William. Bill grew up in an area that was once the center of the gold rush. As a child, he had listened to stories of old men panning for gold in the river, which inspired him to seek their adventure, even though the land was largely depleted by then. In search of better fortune, Bill and his family traveled to Liberia, West Africa, during the gold rush. While Bill was prospecting for gold, Ellie gave birth to their daughter, Rebecca. Unfortunately, Rebecca's early years were not peaceful. Suddenly, shortly after her birth, civil war broke out in Liberia. As a result, Ellie and the children returned to Jamestown, while Bill remained in West Africa, determined to make his fortune mining gold. During this time, Ellie faced numerous challenges in the United States. She received no support from Bill, and although she was a strong and independent woman, managing a household and caring for 2 young children proved to be very difficult for her. They relied on government assistance and occasional jobs that Ellie managed to find. During this period, she received support from her family and the church, which she attended regularly with her children and sister. Her mother often advised her to be self-reliant but also to carry a gun in her handbag for protection. Ellie took this lesson to heart. Despite her delicate appearance, she was always prepared to defend herself and, if needed, to take the initiative in a confrontation. This aspect of her character would later lead to tragic consequences. Ellie is very close to her children and does not let them go far. This protectiveness stems from her own traumatic experience as a child, when she was molested by an adult man. After she confided in her mother reacted violently and threatened him to leave town. This incident left Ellie with lasting psychological scars that she has struggled with throughout her life. She fears that her children may face similar dangers. When her son William went to summer camp away from home, she felt very anxious and scared. Despite her worries, William kept asking his mother to let him go to the summer camp organized by the church. Ellie was very anxious about letting her son spend time with others without her supervision. She hadn't even allowed him to sleep over at friends' houses. Eventually, her sister Jenna reassured her, explaining that she knew the camp organizers well and described them as respectable and good people. After thinking it over, Ellie finally agreed to let her son go, hoping he would enjoy himself. William spent 3 weeks at a church-run tent camp. After returning from the summer camp, Ellie noticed a change in William's behavior. William became aggressive, often sad, and stopped communicating. Ellie sensed that something was bothering him. Despite her and her family's efforts to find out what was happening at the camp, William refused to discuss it with adults. He insisted on being treated like an adult and wanted them to stop asking him questions. Younger sister Rebecca and his mother thought he was trying to imitate the older teenagers he had met at the camp. When the new school year started a few weeks later, everyone thought William was settling in well with his friends. However, when he returned to class, things did not improve. He began to withdraw from his family and became more aggressive with his classmates, rarely interacting with others. His anger often became uncontrollable, and these incidents had increased since he had been at the camp. Ellie was confused by William's changes, and it took her over a year to discover the reason behind them. Unfortunately, the truth behind it was quite heartbreaking. Daniel Mark Driver, a 30-year-old man who attended the same church as Ellie and her children, had recently moved in with his mother, who lived nearby. He was considered a good man and an active member of the church, known for his community involvement and willingness to help other parishioners. He always carried a Bible with him and could easily recite passages from it. Daniel took on the role of kitchen staff at the summer camp and also helped supervise the children, who always spoke positively of him. He is a natural psychologist. According to his parents, Daniel can help solve any difficult situation. Students often come to him to confide in him when they are in trouble. Many boys who do not have fathers consider Daniel as a father figure. With his persuasive skills, he can talk to any teenager. William experienced a significant change in his relationship with Daniel. William used to enjoy spending time with Daniel and interacting with him. But after returning from summer camp, William became noticeably anxious even during casual encounters. During this time, William often argued with his sister Rebecca, seemingly starting conflicts for no reason, and William also began to defy his mother. He had never argued with Ellie before, but now he became increasingly defiant. Occasionally, William's Aunt Jen, who was very close to the family, would take William to her home for the weekend. This gave his mother a break. About 9 months after the camp, Jen took William to her home for a weekend. During his stay, he had the opportunity to spend time with his cousins. Each time, Jen tried to discuss the major changes in his behavior, but William was quiet and avoided answering her questions. However, he later confided in her a secret, insisting that she not tell anyone, not even his mother. Jen agreed to keep it a secret. 7-year-old William shared his experience while he was at summer camp. Daniel began to behave inappropriately towards him. One day, the Daniel lured William into the woods with the promise of showing him frogs and other animals. However, as they went deeper into the woods, the Daniel began to abuse him. This abuse continued regularly, even after the summer camp ended. The boy was afraid to go to church and tried to avoid the Daniel as much as possible. The abuse began when William was 6 years old, and during this time, the Daniel threatened him, saying that he would harm William and his family if he revealed what was happening. Fearing danger to his loved ones, William kept quiet, and the abuse continued for many months. After hearing the story, Jen felt she had to talk to Ellie. She apologized to William for revealing his secret, but felt the need to take action against the rapist and put an end to his actions. Jen first spoke to her sister Ellie about what had happened to William. Ellie was shocked and blamed herself for exposing her child to such a problem. From the beginning, her maternal instincts warned her that William should not attend the camp. However, she succumbed to the pressure, leading to the outcome she feared and experienced. William worried that the man might come back and act on his threat if he found out that William had told anyone about the incident. The boy became increasingly anxious and fearful. He often came home from school in tears, telling his mother that he had seen Daniel's car in the distance. The panic attacks became more frequent, and he began to feel paranoid. He tried his best to cope, but the situation was still not good. Ellie then reported the molestation involving their son to the police. Police checked Daniel's record in a national database, discovering a worrying history of crimes involving children. In 1984, he was charged with indecent exposure to 5 boys in the San Jose area. Although he was arrested, his church community sent letters of support to him before the trial. With no solid evidence other than the boys' testimony, the judge ultimately decided to give Daniel probation instead of a prison sentence, allowing him to escape the consequences of his actions. This leniency allowed him to continue his harmful actions. Daniel then decided to move away and start over. He moved closer to his mother, where no one knew about his past crimes. Daniel also started attending church and developed a healthy relationship with a woman who had a young son. He became more involved with the children, working with them, giving them advice, and eventually got a job at a church summer camp, where he was often around children. However, the woman began to notice Daniel's unusual behavior towards her child and started to pay closer attention. She eventually asked her son if Daniel had ever bothered him, but the boy appeared confused and insisted that nothing inappropriate had happened. The mother, doubting her son's honesty and fearing he was too scared to speak up, did not dismiss her concerns. She continued to monitor Daniel's behavior. A few months later, she caught Daniel molesting her son. She then contacted a friend who was the district attorney. A background check revealed that Daniel had served 5 months in 1983 for child abuse. Concerns about him grew when William's case occurred, prompting the boy's mother, Ellie, to contact the police. At that point, the police investigated Daniel more closely and gathered evidence from new victims of his molestation. After Ellie reported the incident, the police stepped up their efforts to prevent similar crimes by Daniel. Police began questioning all the families who had come into contact with Daniel, including children who had attended the camp. Many of them reported similar experiences, which helped police understand the tactics Daniel used. He repeatedly targeted boys, gaining their trust while threatening to kill them and their families if they spoke out, which proved effective. Police identified 5 new victims in the area, including William. In 1983, charges were filed, but they were unable to arrest Daniel because he had been out of town for an extended period of time. At the time, it was difficult to track his whereabouts due to the lack of cell phones, GPS, and other tracking technology. Police suspected that he had learned of the investigation and had gone into hiding. Both Daniel and his car were placed on the wanted list, and his photo was widely circulated in the press. However, despite these efforts, it took several years to find him. Meanwhile, William's depression and aggressive behavior continued. He frequently got into fights at school, did poorly in school, and became a bully. As a result, William was expelled from several schools and transferred several times. Ellie believes her son's behavior stems from past violence that has deeply affected him. She sought help for her son, taking him to numerous doctors and psychologists in hopes of improving his situation, but nothing seemed to work. In 1993, police finally caught up with Daniel at a store in Palo Alto, California, for shoplifting. After confessing to the theft, Daniel faced charges not only for shoplifting but also for child abuse. Even after Daniel was arrested and awaiting trial, William continued to feel afraid. He struggled to accept that he would have to face his abuser in court. William would have to testify against him, but the thought of it filled him with dread. William was so anxious that the mere mention of the trial made him feel sick. In desperation, Ellie approached the prosecutor to request special arrangements for her son's testimony. She hoped William could testify without Daniel present to spare him serious emotional distress. Unfortunately, the current rules required William to appear before a jury. To address this situation, the only solution was to install cameras so that William could provide testimony from another room. He would be recorded, and the video would be shown in court. Unfortunately, the small community lacked the funds to set this up. As a result, William had to appear in court like the other boys who had also been victimized by Daniel. The trial was challenging due to the presence of many emotionally and physically traumatized children. The boys who had already testified had experienced significant distress, but they managed to get through it. On April 2, 1993, 11-year-old William was one of the last witnesses to take the stand. Ellie tried to prepare him for his meeting with Daniel the criminal as best she could. However, when the car carrying William and his relatives arrived at the courthouse, William did not want to leave. He began to have a panic attack and vomited violently. Ellie reassured him that he needed to testify because testifying was the only way to ensure that a dangerous person would be locked up and unable to harm anyone else. William understood the importance of his testimony, but his fear made it difficult for him to calm down. Ellie, William, and the aunts waited outside the courthouse to be called to testify. During this time, they tried to comfort William and help him calm down. Suddenly, a van arrived at the courthouse and Daniel was taken out. When William saw Daniel, he felt nauseous again. Ellie stared at Daniel as he walked through the courthouse yard. She later remembered that Daniel just smirked and walked past. She felt a burning hatred for this man. As they left the building, Daniel's ex-girlfriend and her son, who was also a victim, testified against him. The woman told Ellie that things were not going well. She noted that the children were nervous and confused in their testimony. Daniel took advantage of this by highlighting inconsistencies in their testimony. He continued to put the children in difficult situations, asking distressing questions that only made them more confused. They became increasingly upset, some of them crying. This makes Ellie worried about William. Ellie fears that the situation could affect the trial, potentially allowing a dangerous criminal to escape justice and return to his former criminal ways. At that moment, Ellie Nessler suddenly realizes that she must serve justice, and Daniel must be stopped forever. Court in this county lack modern security features like metal detectors. It is easy to carry guns inside. And many people in the community, including Jen, carry weapons for self-defense. While on the street, Ellie reached into her purse and quietly pulled out a gun. She hid the weapon as they entered the courtroom, where Ellie shot Daniel 6 times. 5 of the bullets hit him in the back of the head and neck, killing him instantly. People in the courtroom panicked and fled, and police rushed in with loaded guns. Jen stepped in front of her sister, causing Ellie to throw the gun to the ground and raise her hands in surrender. She was then arrested. The shocking story of a mother staging a lynching during a court hearing quickly made national headlines. Within a week, every major media outlet had covered the incident, sparking widespread debate about the lynching. Many saw Ellie as a hero, receiving overwhelming support from local residents, especially those affected by the event. 2 local banks even set up defense funds that the community could contribute to for Ellie, leading to a rush of donations from her supporters. Items such as T-shirts that read "Good shot, Ellie" became popular and which sold well. Similar stickers could be found on cars all over the country. Despite this, Ellie couldn't be celebrated as a national hero for her actions. She was arrested and had a bail set at $500,000. This amount was provided by a guarantor from Salmon, allowing her to return home before the hearings and await trial in her own community. However, not everyone agreed with her decision, and she faced criticism from some members of society who accused her of taking the law into her own hands. Still, the majority, including the local community, viewed her as a protector of her child. Police uncovered additional details about Ellie's situation. They found that she had been under the influence of illegal drugs when she fired her weapon in the courthouse. Ellie claimed she used these substances to give herself the courage needed to endure the stressful courtroom hearings. In October 1993, she received a diagnosis of breast cancer, with doctors estimating she only had 5 years to live. Initially found guilty of manslaughter, Ellie was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, her conviction was later overturned due to the jury's misconduct. She then reached a plea deal with the prosecution, admitting guilt to manslaughter, and ultimately served 3 years in prison before her release. William then moved in with his Aunt Jen. After 2 years, he was finally able to communicate with Ellie, who was still serving her sentence in prison. Ellie expressed her feelings. She deeply regretted having to take someone's life, which was never her intention. However, she felt that the justice system would not be able to protect her son and other children from a dangerous criminal. The only reason she pulled the trigger was the fear that Daniel would be released again. William's life was ruined at a key moment in his growing up. He was molested and then dragged through the courts. William became a hooligan, got involved with bad company, and lost his way. As a result, he had frequent encounters with the law, with courts and prison becoming a regular part of his life. He was first charged with a crime at the age of 14. He was incarcerated 18 times between 1999 and 2004 for various crimes. His criminal record was extensive, including charges of robbery, assault, illegal possession of a weapon, and drug-related offenses. In 2004, when he turned 23, William was living freely, had several tattoos, and resided in his family's house. He didn't have a permanent job, so, similar to his mother in her younger days, he was searching for temporary work for short periods. However, while Ellie had to do this out of necessity due to the economic crisis, for William, it was a result of his involvement in criminal activities. In 2004, he also took a part-time job with his friend David, helping to clean his house during construction and repairs. David had become disabled from working in the oil fields. In June, a dispute arose when tools went missing from the construction site, with both sides blaming each other. When the police arrived, William attacked David and beat him. Due to this incident, along with the previous charges, he was sentenced to 60 days in prison but was released after only 30 days. On July 26, 2004, just an hour after his release, he returned to his workplace. David attempted to escape but was unable to due to his disability. William then attacked David, kicking him in the head several times. As a result, David lost consciousness and died in hospital the following day. William fled the scene but was arrested a few days later and charged with first-degree murder. In June 2005, William Nessler was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Rebecca was the only one to escape the tragic fate and now lives a normal life with her family and children, often reflecting on the absence of her mother and brother during important moments. She deeply misses her brother William, who always looked out for her. Rebecca believes that William would not have ended up in prison if their mother had not shot Daniel. This tragic event caused a series of unfortunate events that made their lives worse. Despite this, she does not resent her mother. She understands that her mother was confused and made a hasty decision. In the end, Rebecca feels that her mother's actions prevented many boys from facing the same fate. Ellie's life ended in tragedy. In addition to battling breast cancer, she faced legal troubles. She became involved in distributing illegal drugs. In 2002, she bought materials for making drugs from a police informant. Initially, Ellie provided some drugs to the informant, but 5 days later, when she returned to collect the pills, she was arrested after the informant reported her. Ellie confessed to her crimes and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but she only served 4 years. She was released in 2006, but sadly, Ellie Nessler passed away from breast cancer on December 26, 2008, at the age of 56. When Ellie died, William asked to be released from prison to say goodbye to his mother. But his request was denied. 2 years later, in 2010, Rebecca and a reporter visited her brother in prison. They spoke for about 2.5 hours. During the conversation, William was very reflective, reviewing everything that had happened in his life. He did not try to justify his actions or blame anyone else. He noted that he felt he had been pushed down a path of self-destruction at the age of 6, a burden he would always carry. William emphasized how public opinion affected him, especially when the case of Daniel, a rapist who was murdered in court, was heavily covered by the media. The attention affected him. The whole community knew that William was also a victim, sexually abused at the age of 6. People discussed his past, which made him feel ashamed. He doesn't want this attention, but it's hard for him to escape it. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pamela Buckbinder. Jacob Nolan was born in 1991 into a wealthy family in Miami, Florida. As the third child in the family, he received a lot of love from his parents. They realized that he was different from his peers. However, at the age of 5, Jacob was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When Jacob turned 15, his family noticed that he was experiencing significant mood swings. Despite this, he was doing well in school. He created an educational smartphone app and won a competition in Miami. However, a month later, Jacob couldn't get out of bed, had no motivation to do anything, even stand up. They finally brought him to a doctor, who diagnosed him with depression and anxiety. At 17, Jacob expressed that he no longer wanted to live. His parents noticed his unstable behavior and mental state, prompting them to take him to a hospital, where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This serious mental illness involves extreme mood swings, ranging from depression to emotional outbursts. Those affected feel trapped in their own thoughts. After finishing high school, Jacob enrolled in college while continuing his treatment. Throughout this time, he saw various psychiatrists who prescribed increasingly stronger medications. From the ages of 17 to 20, Jacob underwent numerous treatment courses, took 5 to 6 pills daily, and tried around 30 different medications, yet none seemed to help. By 2012, at 21 years old, Jacob was still deteriorating. His parents were deeply concerned and unsure of what steps to take next. Then, one day, a relative from New York, Pamela Buckbinder, called with an offer of help. Jacob's parents were relieved, thinking they had gotten help. However, they had no idea of the challenges that were about to come to their family. Pamela, a 43-year-old psychotherapist, lives in Chelsea, Manhattan, with her 4-year-old son, Calder. She and Jacob Nolan are cousins with a 22-year age gap. Jacob was the godfather of her son. In 2012, Pamela offered to help Jacob by inviting him to move from Florida to her apartment. While living with her, she provided him with therapy sessions and prescribed medication. In exchange for her help, Jacob took responsibility for Calder's care. Jacob trusted her completely. In one photo, Jacob is seen lying in bed with Pamela, laughing, which shows he feels comfortable and at home with her. However, it's important to note that this relationship is not just familial. Pamela is also Jacob's psychotherapist. Jacob cared deeply for Calder and treated him like a son. He wanted to set a positive example for his godson of what a real man should be like. This approach seemed to work, as Jacob, who had struggled with mental illness for years, seemed to be stabilizing, joking frequently and always smiling. Unfortunately, this happiness did not last long. Over time, Pamela began to frequently express her frustrations with her ex-partner, Michael Weiss, Calder's father. Pamela ended her relationship with Michael shortly after the birth of her son. Michael Weiss, 38, is a psychotherapist. On the surface, he and Pamela appear to be a happy, loving couple. However, beneath the perfect exterior, their relationship is in trouble. Both Michael and Pamela have reported domestic violence to the police. Pamela once attacked Michael with a piece of broken glass. Michael received medical treatment, stitched up the wound, and later that day, he reported the incident to the police. As a result, Pamela was arrested and charged with assault. However, she was soon forgiven by Michael and the couple reconciled, but a few months later, Pamela went to the police again, claiming that Michael had threatened her and wanted to kill her. She later retracted that statement. Although they were never officially married, Michael and Pamela's relationship lasted about 4 years. After they had a son in 2008, Pamela finally ended the relationship. Their tumultuous relationship ended. But a new conflict arose. The custody battle for their son, Calder. Every day, Pamela tells Jacob about Michael in insulting words. She complained that Michael refused to pay child support and even accused him of doing bad things to their son, Calder, during his visits. On the morning of November 12, 2012, Jacob was awakened by Pamela's gentle touch. She climbed into his bed, caressed his back, and whispered sweet nothings in his ear. She told him that Jacob was her savior. He was the best person in the world because no one understood her like he did. However, her affectionate mood quickly changed. She took a black sports bag from her closet and stuffed it with a long-handled hammer and a kitchen knife. Overwhelmed with emotion, she began to cry and told Jacob that today was the day he needed to face Michael. A diagram showing the entrance to the multi-story office building where Michael is seeing patients is written on a piece of paper. Jacob stands up, grabs his bag, stuffs the diagram into his pocket, and leaves. Before leaving, he washes his face and declares, "Today is the day our lives will change for the better because Michael will be eliminated." Jacob arrived at the right high-rise in Manhattan. He circled the building, observing it from different angles. Entering through the service entrance, he checked in on the first floor, provided his real name, and mentioned he was going to the tutoring center. He was allowed inside. Jacob took the elevator to the 12th floor and made his way to Michael's office. He heard a patient inside and decided to wait in the hallway for the appointment to finish. Soon, the patient would exit, leaving Michael alone. While waiting, Jacob felt increasingly anxious. Doubts flooded his mind, making him question whether he was making the right decisions. At one point, he thought about abandoning everything and running home. However, the idea of returning to Pamela without completing her request and disappointing her was stronger than his fear. Jacob realized he had no choice but to continue. After the patient left, Jacob entered the office and informed Michael that Pamela had asked him to collect financial documents for the Calder's kindergarten. As Michael searched for the documents, Jacob asked to use the restroom. In the restroom, Jacob took out a knife and hid it in his pocket, then retrieved a large hammer. He exited the bathroom and approached Michael, swinging the hammer at him. Thankfully, Michael reacted quickly, ducking just in time to avoid a serious injury, though the hammer struck his shoulder. Jacob then pulled out the knife, and a struggle ensued. Michael, being physically larger, quickly fought back. The people around heard Michael's cry for help. They mistakenly thought that the doctor was being attacked by an unstable mental patient. They quickly called 911 to report the incident. Before the police arrived, Jacob and Michael, feeling exhausted, sat down in the hallway. Jacob took out his phone and took a selfie, which he sent to Pamela along with a question about what he should do next. But he never received a reply. The situation made him feel very strange. The police and ambulance arrived shortly after. The injured men were rushed to the hospital for treatment. Fortunately, none of them had life-threatening injuries. Michael was treated and sent home the same day. Jacob's injuries were more serious and the doctors noted that he was unstable. Jacob was arrested in the hospital while he was receiving treatment. He sent a detailed message to Pamela about what had happened to him and Michael. Although she initially ignored his message, she eventually asked which hospital he was in. When Pamela arrived, she was not allowed to see Jacob, who was already handcuffed to the bed. Jacob spent 4 days in the hospital before being taken to a jail cell after his discharge. He was released on bail of $200,000 while awaiting trial. Jacob was permitted to fly from New York to his parents' home in Florida. Several weeks after the incident, Michael filed a lawsuit against Pamela, accusing her of conspiring to kill him. Michael argued that Pamela was dangerous and insisted that their son should live with him. He presented surveillance footage from a hardware store showing that the day before the attack, Pamela and Jacob had purchased a hammer together, and Pamela had paid in cash. Pamela denied any involvement, saying that she had only asked Jacob to retrieve some financial documents from Michael, but had not asked Jacob to attack. Although she admitted to giving Jacob a knife, she explained that it was to protect her son Calder, since Calder's daycare was on the first floor of the building where Michael worked. Shortly thereafter, the judge transferred custody of Calder to Michael Weiss, granting him full custody and banning Pamela from contacting her son for 5 years. A few months after the incident, Jacob accused Pamela of orchestrating the attack on Michael. He claimed that Pamela meticulously planned the attack, and that she had instructed Jacob to approach Michael and hit him with a hammer. Jacob previously said that Pamela had been psychologically manipulating him. Pamela repeatedly told him that Michael was harming her son, but there was no evidence to support her claim. No one ever witnessed Michael harming Calder or saying anything negative to his son. In fact, relatives testified that Michael cared deeply for his son. Pamela was someone Jacob trusted completely and considered very close. Meanwhile, Jacob's parents were in despair. They fully supported their son and claimed that Pamela had brainwashed him using psychological techniques from her practice. In March 2016, Jacob Nolan's trial began. He claimed that Pamela had forced him to attack Michael Weiss. Prosecutors described Jacob as a spoiled child from a wealthy family, noting that he provided 3 inconsistent accounts of the event and appeared confused. When the police first arrived at Michael's office, Jacob pointed at Michael and accused him of attacking Jacob with a knife. However, during questioning, Jacob claimed that he had never used a hammer in Michael's office. He explained that he had brought the hammer for self-defense because he was afraid of Michael. In his third statement, Jacob said that Michael had attacked him first. Prosecutors presented a key piece of evidence regarding the motive behind the attack on Michael. Just before the attack, Michael had purchased a $1.5 million life insurance policy, naming his son Calder as the beneficiary. However, 3 days before the attack, on November 9, 2012, Michael had agreed to add Pamela as a co-beneficiary and allow her to manage Calder's money. Jacob claimed that this was the first time he had learned about the insurance policy and claimed that Pamela had never shared her financial affairs with him. During the trial, it was revealed that Jacob had purchased plastic zip ties from a hardware store in addition to the hammer found with Pamela. Jacob confirmed this and made a shocking admission. Pamela had asked him not only to kill Michael but also to ensure he suffered before dying. She described brutal acts that Jacob was supposed to carry out. Jacob refused to inflict such extreme cruelty. But he agreed to kill Michael. Jacob mentioned that Pamela initially wanted to create a homemade weapon using an air pistol, but when they got to the hardware store, they decided it would be easier and more effective to use a hammer instead. Jacob's attorney focused on proving that Jacob was insane. However, proving that he was insane is quite difficult. Currently, there is no test that can reveal a person's thoughts and feelings at the time of the crime. Evaluations are usually based on interviews, police reports, medical records, and sometimes social media messages. Often, two different psychiatrists can give conflicting opinions, which can confuse judges and juries. Although mental illness can affect emotions, thoughts, and behavior, throughout the trial, Jacob clearly understood his actions and admitted that they were wrong and bad. He did not appear insane in court. He was handsome, articulate, well-dressed, and answered questions clearly. Pamela was not called to testify at the trial by either the prosecution or the defense. Jacob Nolan, who had a mental disorder, faced skepticism regarding his claim that Pamela was the one who initiated the attack. Before the trial, Jacob's lawyers hired detectives to locate Pamela, but they were unable to find her, and her apartment was empty. In March 2016, after a 2-week trial, 24-year-old Jacob Nolan was convicted of attempted murder and second-degree assault, receiving a sentence of 9.5 years in prison. Jacob was very upset about his sentence, stating, "It's unfair. I'm not a danger to society." His parents regretted their decision to send him to live with their Pamela, believing it was their biggest mistake. On October 19, 2017, nearly 5 years after Michael's attack, police located Pamela in Sullivan, New York. The Manhattan District Attorney charged her with conspiracy to murder Michael Weiss. At the time of Pamela's arrest, police found her passport and Calder's birth certificate. Pamela was arrested and maintained her innocence. She hired 2 of New York's top attorneys, who claimed that the video showing her doing laundry and the video of her buying the hammer had been edited. They claimed that Pamela was a highly educated psychotherapist and would never have considered organizing a murder. In the 5 years after Jacob's attack, Pamela lived a normal life. She worked and rented an apartment. She did not attempt to go into hiding or flee the country, but she avoided reporters and did not comment on Jacob's crimes. Pamela was detained before her trial at the notorious Rikers Island prison in New York, where she spent 5 years due to legal issues. On September 7, 2022, during a pre-trial hearing, Pamela made a statement agreeing to plead guilty in return for a lighter sentence. However, a month later, she decided to withdraw her plea. Pamela's trial took place. The jury found Pamela Buchbinder guilty and she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. After the verdict was read, she looked sadly at her relative, who blew her kisses. Jacob and Pamela are currently serving their sentences in separate correctional facilities in New York. Jacob is scheduled to be released in 2024, while Pamela will be released in 2027. Jacob maintains regular phone contact with his parents. He has expressed remorse for his actions and reflects on them every night. He even wishes to meet Michael Weiss in person to apologize and seek forgiveness. When Pamela is released, her son, Calder, will be 19. He is currently being raised by his biological father, Michael, who still works in Manhattan. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Michael Reese. In February 2015, around 8 p.m., the Morris Police Department received a call from a woman named Cindy Reese, 40. She reported that when she returned home from the store, she found the front door wide open. Inside, she found items scattered on the floor. Cindy attempted to contact her husband, Michael, but he did not answer. Feeling scared, she did not go further into the house. Instead, she went to a landline near the main entrance, called the police, and then walked outside. After the call, at 9:11 p.m., Cindy contacted Michael's father and informed him that their home had likely been burglarized and asked him to come immediately. Michael and Cindy lived in the Morris Center on Bank Street, right across from a police station. The police quickly went to Michael's house. When they arrived, they found Cindy standing outside looking scared. Inside the home, police found a chaotic scene, with a table overturned and furniture scattered about. They soon found Michael Reese, 40. At the back of the home, he was found dead on the floor in an unusual position. Michael had been shot in the back of the head. Michael Reese was born in July 1974 in Alabama. From a young age, he loved fishing. Michael finished high school and attended college, where he studied computer technology, eventually securing a job in that field. He was skilled with computers and often helped others. Although Michael got married, his first marriage ended in divorce due to his wife's infidelity. He didn't dwell on this loss since they had no children and continued to seek the right partner for himself. In 2008, Michael was introduced to Cindy by a mutual friend. They were nearly the same age, and a strong connection quickly developed between them, leading to a passionate romance. Cindy was born in January 1975 in Alabama. Her father served as an assistant pastor in a Baptist church, and she often accompanied him to work as a child. Growing up, Cindy was a model student who adhered to the rules. She graduated from college with a degree in accounting. In 1995, Cindy married, but her first marriage ended in tragedy in 2007 when she returned home from work to find her husband deceased. He had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Cindy was devastated by her husband's death. A year later, in 2008, she met Michael Reese, and they fell in love. They married on September 5, 2009, and spent their honeymoon at Disneyland. After the wedding, they moved into Michael's grandmother's house in Morris. Cindy worked as an accountant at the Jefferson County Courthouse, while Michael was a computer technician at St. Vincent's Hospital in Birmingham. The couple had no children and, like many in Morris, spent a significant amount of time at church. Cindy, who grew up in a Lutheran family, convinced Michael to join the Sardis Baptist Church. After his baptism, they attended services together every Wednesday and Sunday. Cindy was also the music director of the church. Unfortunately, Michael received sad news when his mother was diagnosed with cancer. Concerned about her health, Michael visited her often and spent much of his time caring for her. On February 14, 2015, Michael celebrated Valentine's Day with his mother, but just 4 days later, on February 18, he was tragically murdered. Michael was known as a kind and positive young man, generous and trustworthy. Police quickly opened an investigation into his murder. Michael had been shot once in the back of the head. Inside the house, everything was in disarray. The police suspected that the Michael family was targeted for a robbery that went wrong. On the table, there was still uneaten fast food. However, investigation revealed no evidence of a break-in through the front door. Hours after the murder, Cindy Reese was taken to the police station for questioning. She explained that on February 18, she and her husband, Michael, had gone to work during the day. In the evening, Michael picked her up and they visited Cindy's mother. Around 6 p.m., they attended a church service, which ended at 7 p.m. They then stopped at a cafe to order some fast food and take it home. As they were getting home, Cindy suddenly remembered that she needed to buy groceries and told Michael that she would go and get the groceries and hurry home. Michael took the fast food and left. Cindy went to the supermarket and was gone for about 30 minutes. When she returned home, she found the front door wide open. Worried, she looked inside and saw things scattered everywhere. She called out to her husband but got no answer, which scared her, and she decided not to go any further into the house. Worried, she immediately called the police and walked out. At that time, she did not know that her husband, Michael, was dead. Cindy reported that a .38 revolver and some jewelry were missing from their home. When asked who might have killed Michael, Cindy said that as she was driving near her home, she saw a strange man wearing a black hoodie walking down the street. She also shared that she and Michael were planning to have children and had even added a room to their home. They were in the process of renovating, with the assistance of a contractor. Cindy speculated that this man might be involved in the murder. The interrogation lasted for several hours. During this time, Cindy listed all of her close friends, co-workers, and acquaintances that she and Michael had interacted with. Police noticed that when Cindy mentioned an old family friend, she appeared very happy. Meanwhile, the entire town knew that Cindy was having an affair. Although everyone suspected her secret relationship, Cindy denied it and refused to admit to any adulterous behavior. Her lover was Jeffrey Brown, the pastor of the Baptist church. Church members mentioned that they had seen Jeffrey and Cindy kissing in the car several times, but for some reason, no one spoke up about it. During questioning, Cindy denied having an affair with Jeffrey, claiming that they were just friends who occasionally walked around town together. Jeffrey was also questioned. He stated that on the evening of February 18th, he was in another city, 50 miles away from Michael's family home, and had nothing to do with Michael's murder. Jeffrey openly admitted to having a romantic relationship with Cindy. They first met in August 2013 when Jeffrey was a candidate for pastor at Sardis Baptist Church. At the time, Cindy was a pastor and worship leader at the church, and she had been married to Michael for 4 years. Jeffrey was also married to a woman named Noelle and had 2 children. Michael's family developed a close friendship with Jeffrey. They spent time together and went on vacations. However, in late 2013, a secret affair began between Jeffrey and Cindy. This affair did not go unnoticed by church members, leading to rumors. As a result, Jeffrey was forced to leave the Baptist church because the leadership believed that an adulterer was not fit to be a pastor or a role model for the congregation. Before becoming a pastor, Jeffrey was a Marine, a police officer, and then a hairdresser. At the time of the Michael family tragedy, he was working as a pest control specialist. Jeffrey and Cindy continued their affair, and Jeffrey divorced his wife, Noelle. However, Cindy chose to stay with her husband, Michael. During questioning, Jeffrey expressed his frustration with Cindy's unwillingness to leave Michael, claiming that Michael had abused her. Despite the accusations, Jeffrey denied any involvement in the murder. After questioning Jeffrey, Cindy confirmed that she was indeed having an affair with him. She revealed that her relationship with Michael was fading. He spent too much time on his phone and playing video games, often neglecting her. On weekends, Michael enjoyed fishing and the couple rarely had intimate moments. In the summer of 2014, Cindy confessed to her husband, Michael, that she had cheated on him. Although he was understandably upset, Michael assured her that he did not want a divorce. The couple made an effort to repair their relationship. To celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary, they visited Disneyland, hoping to rekindle the romance they once had. Michael was aware that Jeffrey, Cindy's lover, had intentions of winning her over, which made him fearful for his family's well-being. While being questioned about her relationship, Cindy talked about her time with Jeffrey. When asked if Jeffrey could hurt Michael, she replied, "Of course not, Jeffrey is a very religious man." The investigation into the case is still ongoing. Police have not found any witnesses or surveillance footage to confirm that a stranger wearing a black hoodie was seen walking down the street on February 18. A contractor who was doing renovations for Michael's family has a solid alibi. He was at the church at the time of the crime. The initial theory of a robbery was dismissed because there were no signs of forced entry. While some items were missing from the house, most of the jewelry was intact. It appears the killer intentionally created a mess by overturning tables, throwing blankets on the floor, and making it look like a robbery. Cindy claimed that she was in the store at the time of the murder. She said she bought orange juice and ham. When she checked out, she added a few small items to her cart and paid for everything. The police found it odd that Cindy would rush to the store when their refrigerator was already full. They had eaten ham and orange juice for breakfast, so it seemed like there was no real need to buy those things. Additionally, Michael and Cindy bought fast food for dinner. Cindy loved good food and her relatives often commented on this. People commented that Cindy would not let her hot dinner at home get cold and would not go to the store without eating her favorite hamburger and fries first. Police went to Cindy's workplace. In her office, they found a wedding photo of her and Michael displayed on a shelf, framed with hearts. Below, next to her computer, was a photo of Cindy with Jeffrey. Police also discovered financial documents showing that Cindy had paid for the apartment where Jeffrey lived, using her credit card. Jeffrey had frequent financial problems. In addition, the couple shared a bank account and Cindy had always supported Jeffrey financially. Police also discovered cell phone records that showed what happened on the day of the murder. Evidence from Jeffrey's cell phone showed that Jeffrey was near Michael's home at the time of Michael's murder, specifically at a gas station. Police also uncovered a disturbing incident that occurred a few months before Michael's death. Jeffrey had spoken to two of his co-workers, who were drivers, and asked if they could kill the man who had murdered his wife. Jeffrey offered to pay the two co-workers with money in his car as payment, but did not specify who the target was. He only mentioned that the man drove a white Honda Accord and worked at St. Vincent's Hospital. The description matched Michael Reese, but his co-workers declined the offer and reported Jeffrey's alarming request to the police. Less than a month after Michael was murdered, Cindy Reese and Jeffrey Brown were arrested on March 11, 2015. Neither of them admitted guilt. Police believe that on the night of the murder, Michael and Cindy returned home with takeout and intended to have dinner together. When Michael went to the back door to let the dog in, Cindy shot him in the back of the head with a revolver she kept at home. After the shooting, she created a mess, took several valuables, and went to the store. On her way, she disposed of the gun and jewelry, then returned home and called 911. Police are convinced that both Cindy and Jeffrey were involved in the murder, with Jeffrey likely being nearby at the time and possibly helping Cindy afterward. After Cindy's arrest, she was released from prison and lived freely while awaiting trial. She chose not to post bail for Jeffrey, who remained in custody. Just days before his trial in August 2016, Jeffrey sought a plea deal that would allow him to plead guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Cindy. He said that Cindy had instigated Michael's murder, explaining that she was afraid to divorce her husband because she was concerned about how her family would react. Jeffrey mentioned that Cindy had previously expressed a desire to kill her husband, which he initially interpreted as a joke. On the night of the murder, he claimed to have overheard everything that happened between Michael and Cindy on his cell phone. He reported hearing the couple arguing both in the car and at home, as well as gunshots. After Cindy killed her husband, she asked Jeffrey to help her get rid of the gun. They arranged to meet at a gas station, where she gave him the gun along with some jewelry, which he discarded. Cindy's trial began in November 2016, and she denied all of Jeffrey's allegations. She admitted to meeting Jeffrey at the gas station but said he asked her to come because he was out of money for gas. Cindy said she gave him $15 to help him. During the trial, she maintained that she and Michael had no intention of getting a divorce and wanted to work on their marriage. She also claimed that she no longer had any feelings for Jeffrey and accused him of stalking her, her family, and their home. Cindy's arguments were dismissed, as Cindy had not provided financial support to Jeffrey while at the gas station. Police also discovered that Cindy had frequently exchanged explicit photos with Jeffrey, suggesting that their relationship had not ended. Cindy's lawyers argued that she had no motive to kill her husband and placed the blame squarely on Jeffrey. The defense portrayed Jeffrey as obsessive, impulsive, and manipulative. No traces of gunpowder or blood were found on Cindy's body or clothing, and the angle of the gunshot wound indicated that the shooter was taller than Cindy, about the same height as Jeffrey. To this day, it remains unclear who shot Michael and what exactly happened that night. Prosecutors argue that Cindy did the killing, with Jeffrey helping her dispose of the weapon. In 2016, Jeffrey Brown was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2036. On January 11, 2017, Cindy Reese was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Her family believes she is innocent and is determined to fight for her release. In 2019, Michael's parents discovered that Cindy had been transferred from a maximum security prison to a lower security facility near the site of the murder. Michael's family went to court and successfully had her returned to a maximum security prison. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Justice Garrett. Justice Garrett, a teenage girl from Florida, USA, suddenly disappeared after school. As police investigated the case, they discovered the motive and the horrific events surrounding her disappearance. They were increasingly shocked by the brutality of the perpetrator, the most brutal in the history of the county. It had been just 3 weeks since Justice's 16th birthday. That day, she had overslept and woken up later than usual, causing her to miss the school bus. Her mother, Danielle, then 37, was busy getting her 5-year-old daughter ready for kindergarten and couldn't help Justice get to school. Danielle believed Justice could handle herself. Justice was going to return home by the school bus in the evening as usual. But she didn't return home at the scheduled time. Initially, Justice's family wasn't concerned because she had many friends and often stayed late with them after school. However, as time went on and she still hadn't returned, her mother and stepfather began to worry. They assumed she might be spending the night at her best friend's house. Since they needed to wake up early for work, they went to bed without waiting for her. But when morning came, Justice still hadn't returned home. Danielle grew impatient and worried about her daughter's whereabouts. Unable to reach Justice by phone, Danielle decided to contact the police for help. The police took the missing person report seriously and began an investigation. Police checked out places where Justice might have been, as they often see teens staying with friends before returning home. However, Justice's mother sensed something was wrong because Justice had not contacted family, which worried her. Police considered the possibility that Justice might have run away. Danielle said Justice often spent weekends with friends, and she often helped her mother take care of her younger sister and would not disappear without telling anyone. Justice always dealt with her problems instead of running away from them. And she always discussed any difficulties with her mother. Danielle was worried because all Justice's belongings were left at home. She believed something terrible might have happened to her daughter, so she insisted on starting the search right away. Despite the police's reassurances, Danielle's anxiety grew. Her daughter had never hung out with bad friends, and it was unusual for her to run away or avoid problems. Even when she was with friends, she would call her parents to let them know. However, she did not return any calls or texts. She was friendly and sociable, and did not use drugs or alcohol. It seemed completely impossible that she would just run away without telling anyone. Police checked Justice's database and confirmed her mother's story. She had no criminal record and there were no reports of her being in an accident. Police began searching for Justice by interviewing several teenagers, classmates, and acquaintances. Some said they had seen her sleeping in the cemetery, while others said she had moved in with a secret boyfriend. In fact, Justice had no boyfriend and had never been to the cemetery. None of these claims were true. Police interviewed everyone who knew Justice, including her teachers and classmates. They discovered that she had not been to school that morning. A review of surveillance footage along Justice's route and a check of her phone's geolocation showed that she left home around 7:25 a.m. to go to school, but she disappeared about 30 minutes later, on her way to school. What happened to Justice during that time? For days after she went missing, on April 17th, a man called the police. While out jogging, he noticed a strange, unpleasant odor coming from the edge of the trail, which piqued his curiosity and prompted him to head toward the woods. After walking a few meters, the man accidentally discovered a body. He then called 911. The police quickly arrived and discovered a female body that showed signs of severe decomposition. Although there was some minor damage caused by animals and the hot and humid weather. Most of the damage was caused by a chemical substance. Forensic experts determined that it was a type of bleach that had been poured on the victim's body, likely to cover up the evidence. The identity of the deceased could not be determined on the spot and laboratory analysis was required. However, the police suspected that this could be Justice, the person everyone was looking for. Police confirmed the identity of the body as Justice after DNA analysis. Her body was found in a wooded area near Delanda, about a 30-minute drive from her home in Sorrento. Her upper body was badly decomposed, exposing her bones. Her lower body was less damaged, suggesting that she had been exposed to fewer chemicals. Although the exact cause of Justice's death could not be determined due to the condition of her body, it appears that she died from strangulation. Evidence showed that her pants had been pulled down to her ankles and her sweater pulled up to her neck, suggesting that a sexual assault had taken place. Unfortunately, bleach destroyed much of the evidence, making it difficult to prove this motive. It was clear that she had suffered multiple blows to the face, as her nose was broken in several places. Police interviewed the jogger who discovered the body and reported it at 9:11 a.m. He provided important information about the incident. The jogger said that on the 16th, while running on the trail where the body was later discovered, he noticed another person in the distance. He believed it was a man based on his build, but he was unable to provide further details because the person ran away when he heard the jogger approaching. This unusual behavior caught the jogger's attention, but he did not go any closer to the area or see the body that day. However, he returned several days later when he noticed a foul odor. The investigation confirmed that the jogger was not involved in the incident. He passed a lie detector test and had an alibi for the day Justice went missing. To gather new information, police carefully reviewed surveillance camera footage along the entire route Justice took, especially at the bus stop where she was supposed to board. Justice's mother initially claimed that her daughter had walked to school by herself. However, police soon discovered that this was not true. In fact, her stepfather, Robert, had offered to drive Justice to school that morning. Police were suspicious of Danielle's lie about how her daughter got to school, so they approached her more cautiously. This time, she changed her story, admitting that Justice had not walked alone. Robert had driven her in his car. She explained that she had lied because Robert's driver's license had been suspended and she feared he would punish her if she told the police the truth. And that Danielle thought her little lie wouldn't get in the way of finding her daughter. Unfortunately, the deception in this case made it difficult for the investigation to piece together what really happened. The police requested the school's surveillance camera footage, which covered the parking lot. This is the location where Robert was supposed will drop her down. However, the camera was malfunctioning at the time and no footage was recorded. Therefore, it was impossible to confirm whether Robert dropped Justice off or not. However, multiple witnesses reported that Justice did not come to school and that no one had seen her that day. The only person confirmed to have seen Justice alive was Robert, and only he knew what really happened. The police brought Robert in for questioning. Eventually, he began to talk. On the day of the incident, Robert claimed that he never took Justice to school. Instead, he drove her to a nearby town at her request and dropped her off at the entrance of the town so she could meet a male friend. Robert suspected that this friend might be her secret boyfriend, whom she was dating without her mother's permission. In order to build a better relationship with Justice and gain her trust, Robert decided to comply with her request. However, Robert did not know the name or any details about the friend Justice was meeting. Justice then assured Robert that she could get to school by herself and planned to return by bus, so he felt that everything was fine. He could not wait for her because he had to go to work in the Volos district, and he did not have much time. Unfortunately, Danielle and Robert were unable to provide any useful information. The police then turned to Justice's friends, who all confirmed that she had recently started talking about a guy she met online. He had shown a lot of interest in her and texted her frequently, which she shared with her friends. However, Justice felt uncomfortable with his excessive attention and her friends believed that Justice would not date him. The police examined the Justice's social media accounts, looking closely at her likes, comments, recent subscriptions, and conversations. They discovered one account that had been in frequent contact with Justice over the past few months and showed various activities related to her. This account belonged to an 18-year-old man, whose profile picture featured a muscular young man. He had been flirting with Justice, expressing interest in getting to know her, and complimenting her. Despite mentioning that he lived nearby, police were unable to find anyone who looked like him, and none of her friends recognized him. Justice did not respond to his persistent messages, choosing instead to ignore him. However, police believe the social media account is crucial to solving the case. Police then conducted a thorough search of his social media accounts. They discovered a phone number associated with his account, but instead of belonging to an 18-year-old, it was registered to a middle-aged man named Robert Kern, Justice's stepfather. This revelation shocked the police. When they approached Robert again, he, who had initially been cooperative, suddenly changed his attitude and refused to communicate. The police were determined to find answers, especially since Robert had lied, and now all the evidence pointed to him as the prime suspect in Justice's murder. Despite his protests, police arrested Robert Kern. However, social media interactions are not sufficient grounds to charge someone with murder. At the time, Robert was very close to the family, as he had been dating Justice's mother since the previous fall. He often stayed overnight at their home and kept in close contact with the entire family. There was no evidence of inappropriate behavior toward Justice. Robert denied any wrongdoing and dismissed the idea that he had harassed Justice. He suggested that his frequent compliments were meant to encourage Justice, arguing that receiving attention from a man could be a compliment. However, this explanation seems implausible, as Justice ignored his messages and she thought he was weird for discussing him with her friends. The police, looking for evidence against Robert, decided to interview Justice's close friend, Rachel. Rachel explained that their friendship had recently become close, as Justice often stayed overnight at her house. Rachel mentioned that a few months before the tragedy, Justice had stayed so often that it aroused suspicion. It seemed that Justice was trying to avoid going home. Robert had also been staying at Danielle's house quite often in recent months. Could his presence have contributed to Justice's reluctance to go home? Rachel reported that Justice had spent nearly a month at her house in the weeks before her death. She observed that Justice had become increasingly anxious. Previously calm, she now flinched at any accidental touch and implied that she was afraid of Robert, her stepfather. Rachel recalled seeing Robert on the day Justice disappeared. She described him as looking very uneasy, to the point where she actually felt scared. This made her understand why Justice liked to stay at her house every night. Police decided to take a closer look at Robert's background, focusing on his social media interactions and cell phone calls. What they discovered was disturbing. Robert had a significant criminal record, including 2 burglaries dating back to the early 2000s. Recent search history showed that he had looked up drugs that could cause unconsciousness, such as chloroform, and that he had purchased the drug. He also spent a lot of time studying maps, especially the nearby woods, likely in search of a suitable place to hide a body. He also researched methods for disposing of evidence. After learning that bleach had been used on Justice's body, police ran a geolocation check on Robert's cell phone on the day Justice went missing. They discovered that he had not been driving and had not dropped Justice off at a bus stop or school. Instead, Robert went into a wooded area where Justice's body was later discovered. Police reported that Robert's cell phone was not working for about an hour during this time. Initially, Robert claimed that he was on his way to work, but this was false. In fact, he took Justice into the woods, where he attacked, raped, and killed her. Justice was later charged with murder and was held in custody until his trial began. The exact motive behind the crime was never revealed, as Robert did not reveal it until the very end of the trial. The prosecution argued that the crime was murder with the intent to commit rape. Robert chose not to testify in his own defense during the trial, but he never admitted to any wrongdoing. However, the prosecutor's office had enough evidence to charge him with murder. Robert's troubled criminal history was presented during the trial. He was first arrested in May 2019 in New York State on fraud charges and was held in the county jail. It was mentioned that in 1999, he had committed burglary and breaking and entering, which resulted in an 18-month prison sentence. 3 years later, he was arrested again for burglary and served a year in prison. The prosecution later proved that Robert's testimony was completely false. He mentioned that he dropped Justice off near the school early in the morning and that he worked as a carpenter. However, both of these statements were proven to be lies. After being caught lying, Robert tried to create more excuses. But they were all designed to fool the police. They were able to accurately track the movements of both Robert and Justice. They compared the timestamps on Robert's cell phone and the searches on his phone, which showed that he had been planning the crime for a long time. The prosecution argued that Justice had no chance of surviving from the beginning because Robert had intended to kill her. Vegetation from where Justice's body was found in Robert's car, although he claimed he had never been in the area. However, he had in fact been there at least twice after the murder. He returned to the location on April 16 to pour a chemical on the body to destroy evidence of the crime. At that time, he was spotted by a jogger. The prosecutor's office attempted to prove that Robert's actions were sexually motivated, arguing that he had intentionally kidnapped Justice in order to rape and harm her. Robert had been keeping tabs on Justice for a long time, and she tried her best to avoid him, so she was rarely home. Danielle, Justice's mother, was devastated by her daughter's murder. In her testimony, she said that Robert had discouraged her from calling the police immediately after Justice's disappearance, convincing her that Justice was just staying at a friend's house. He also pressured her to lie, claiming that Justice had gone to school by himself. At first, The Danielle did not understand why he made such demands, thinking that he was afraid of the consequences of driving without a license. After reviewing the case documents, the jury reached its decision in just 30 minutes. They found Robert Kern guilty of first-degree murder of Justice Garrett. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 5 years for attempting to obstruct the investigation. Throughout the trial, he never admitted his guilt and showed no remorse for his actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, he maintained his innocence until the very end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Leon Britz. The Sharetha and Leon Britz case of 2020 not only shocked South Africa, where it took place, but also attracted international attention. From the very beginning, the investigation identified an innocent person as the prime suspect. Only through a surprising confession was the real culprit revealed. The Leon family, European immigrants, moved to the small town of Patter in the Northern Cape province of South Africa in the early 1970s. While Patter is modest in size, it plays a significant role as an economic and tourist center in the Bushmanland region. Leon has an older brother named Toki. Leon's family is relatively wealthy for their community. His father owns the only large hotel in the area, which later expanded into a large hotel and restaurant complex. Both Toki and Leon did well in school. After finishing school, Toki left his hometown, while Leon chose to stay. He helped his parents run the hotel as a teenager and studied business. Leon is intelligent and has a natural talent for business, which has helped him run the hotel effectively. At the Leon family hotel, many events, parties, and celebrations took place. During one of these occasions, Leon spotted a beautiful young girl among the guests. She was a brunette with green eyes and a charming smile. Curious, he approached her to introduce himself and discovered that she was only 14 years old and still in school, although she appeared much more mature. This revelation confused Leon, who was 25 at the time. Despite his concerns, he asked her to dance, and afterwards, they spent about an hour talking on the terrace. The girl's name was Sharetha, and from that moment, Leon could not stop thinking about her and eagerly anticipated their next meeting. Sharetha was born on September 6, 1990, the youngest of 3 children to immigrants from Eastern Europe. Her family faced severe financial hardship. When Sharetha was only 9 years old, her father died of a snakebite, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on her own, while struggling to provide for them. As a result, all 3 sisters had to go to work to help support the family, leading to a difficult and arduous childhood. Leon, a rich guy, suddenly entered her life. Leon truly loved her. He found every opportunity to see her, picked her up from school, took her to trendy restaurants, gave her expensive gifts and trendy clothes, and tried his best to make her happy. Sharetha experienced the luxuries and wealth. She realized that with him, she had the ability to build a family where she and her future children would never have to worry about money. Sharetha's mother approved of the relationship, despite her daughter's young age. She considered Leon to be trustworthy, decent, and kind, and no one doubted his sincerity. However, Leon's parents were quite concerned about the relationship, as it could lead to serious legal problems if it went too far. Despite their concerns, Leon insisted that he was willing to wait until Sharetha turned 18 when he planned to marry her. About a year into the relationship, 15-year-old Sharetha discovered she was pregnant. She was unsure about sharing the news, knowing that it would upset both her mother and her boyfriend. To hide her changing body, She began wearing baggy clothes and became quiet and withdrawn. Eventually, she couldn't keep it a secret any longer and decided to tell Leon. When she revealed the news, Leon was stunned. He realized that the situation would not only damage his reputation, but also create serious legal problems. Leon was worried about being accused of seducing a young woman, so he couldn't let that happen. He took her to a private clinic, where they confirmed she was pregnant with twins. Leon found a doctor at the same clinic who would perform anonymous abortions. Sarita was heartbroken. Leon, who had promised to love and protect her, was now pressuring her to end the lives of their unborn children. Leon, who was older, convinced her that it was necessary. He promised that after marriage they would have children, but now having children would ruin their lives and their dreams of a happy future together. Left with no other choice, Sarita agreed to the procedure. She experienced physical pain for days afterward, but the emotional trauma was even worse, leaving her feeling guilty and deeply depressed. She isolated herself in her room, crying constantly. Her mother did not understand the severity of the situation, thinking that her daughter was simply upset after an argument with her boyfriend, believing that things would be better once they made up. A few days later, Leon visited Sarita at her home. He then took her into town to walk around the park and do some shopping. He thought this would help her feel better. Although she eventually returned to her normal routine, her feelings of resentment and suspicion towards him remained. 3 years later, during her senior year of high school, the Sarita discovered she was pregnant again. She was just a few months away from turning 18, and this unexpected pregnancy was not supposed to create any significant problems. However, when she informed Leon, he reacted very negatively and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, claiming they were too young to start a family. This time, Sarita firmly refused, stating that she would keep the child, even if it meant raising it alone. After some consideration, Leon eventually proposed to her, presenting a diamond ring. By this time, the intense feelings they had for each other had faded, but Sarita's pregnancy left him with no choice. Shortly after her 18th birthday, the couple got married in a lavish ceremony. Although they appeared happy, they both had doubts about their decision. A few months later, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, they had twin boys. The family lived a wealthy life. Leon's parents built a successful business over many years. Leon also started his own fast food chain and restaurant, which was thriving. However, starting in the mid-2010s, the family faced significant challenges. In 2014, Leon's father suddenly passed away due to long-standing heart problems, which affected his mother's health. She began to show signs of rapid dementia, forcing her sons to take her to a specialist clinic for care. Toki returned to his hometown after many years to assist his younger brother in managing the family business, and together they took over the operation of a hotel. Leon decided to let Sarita join the family business, something she had always wanted to do. They agreed to register a mining equipment and tools store in her name. She worked hard at the store while also caring for their 3 young sons. However, as the twins grew older, the parents had to find a suitable school for all of their children. Finding quality education in South Africa was not easy. They eventually found a good school in the nearby town of Kakamas, about 75 miles from Leon's home. They then rented a spacious house in Kakamas for Sarita and her sons to live in, while Leon stayed in Poeter to manage the business. Although Sarita enjoyed running the store, she had to give up that role to focus on raising the children. The family only visited Leon on weekends and holidays, and he rarely came to Kakamas because of his busy schedule. At first, everything seemed fine between the couple, but over time, they grew more distant, and their feelings for each other faded. In 2018, Sarita began experiencing health issues, which she initially dismissed. However, Medical tests revealed that she had cancer and cardiovascular problems. She quickly underwent surgery to remove the malignant tumor and began a treatment plan. Thankfully, the timely intervention saved her life, but she now required ongoing therapy at a clinic in Johannesburg, which was quite costly. Leon's family was able to pay for Saratha's medical expenses. To help manage the household while she was receiving treatment, Saratha hired a nanny and a maid. By this time, Leon and Saratha had grown apart and were living separate lives. Saratha began an affair in Johannesburg. It appears that Leon was also seeing other women, as evidenced by explicit photos and text messages found on his phone. The couple now only stay in touch because of their 3 children. Despite the family problems, business is doing well. The hotel, retail stores and restaurant chain are making a significant profit. Leon has invested some of this money in real estate in major cities, which provides a good income through rentals. Their family is not only the richest in Poeter, but also one of the richest in the Northern Cape province. As Leon's business grew more profitable, he faced increasing threats from jealous people who wanted to harm him, his parents, and his brother. To protect his assets, he installed safes and hidden compartments in his office and home, where he stored cash in various currencies, stocks, diamonds, jewelry, and gold bars. Although the threats initially worried him, Leon eventually began to ignore them as they became a regular occurrence. He believed they were just attempts to scare him. A tragic event occurred that led to Leon's death. On October 7, 2020, Saratha called him to check on their dogs. A neighbor reported that they had escaped. Leon assured her that he would call back after checking on the dogs, but he never did. Worried, Saratha tried calling him several times, but no one answered. She left their children with a nanny and drove to their home in Poeter. When she arrived, the front door was unlocked, but the house was eerily quiet and no one answered her calls. She went to the backyard and discovered her husband's body floating face down in the pool. There were wounds on his back, indicating that he was dead. In a panic, Saratha called the police, then contacted Toki to inform him of the situation. When the police arrived, they quickly sealed off the house. They found that Leon had died violently. His body had multiple stab wounds and signs of a struggle. A safe in the house had been opened and its contents taken. Initially, the police theorized that a burglar had broken into the house. And Leon was home at the time, leading to a confrontation that left Leon dead. However, many other valuables that could be seen in the house were still intact, suggesting that the burglars had specifically targeted the contents of the safe. Following Leon's murder, much speculation about the cause of his death arose on social media. Many people knew about the threats Leon had received over the years and suspected that competitors or enemies may have acted on those threats. Police later identified Leon's brother Toki as the prime suspect. Toki had managed the family business with Leon for many years and had visited Leon shortly before the murder, making Toki the last person known to have seen Leon alive. Complicating matters, their mother is critically ill, with doctors estimating that she has only a few months to live. It is rumored that Toki is unhappy with the way the estate has been divided, especially with Leon receiving the lion's share, and that Toki may want to change the will. This theory explains why other items in the house were left intact and why the killer only targeted the contents of the safe. However, Toki adamantly denied any involvement, claiming that he would never harm his brother, especially since they had never had any conflicts over money. He sought the support of Saratha, who expressed her belief in his innocence and offered to help him find a good lawyer. For nearly 2 months, the investigation had stalled with no new evidence, leads, or witnesses. Then, 35-year-old Jacques van Vuren walked into the police station and proposed a deal. He would plead guilty and reveal the identities of his accomplices in exchange for a lighter sentence. Jacques and Suretha had been friends in school, and he had feelings for her, but she did not love him and eventually started dating Leon. They had not seen each other for many years, but one day they ran into each other at a shopping mall and started talking. Jacques was having a hard time at the time. He had gone through a divorce, lost his job, was an alcoholic, and was in dire need of money. Suretha realized that Jacques still had feelings for her, so she opened up to him about her unhappy marriage. She told him that her husband was abusive and treated her badly, but she felt trapped because he threatened to take their sons away and leave her nothing. Jacques was prevented from seeing his children by his ex-wife after the divorce, so he felt a deep sympathy for Suretha and wanted to help her. They exchanged phone numbers, and a few days later, Suretha called him with a tearful story. She claimed that her husband had abused her and that she could not leave him. She suggested that the only solution was to get rid of him. Suretha was a master of psychological manipulation, and Jacques believed her. Suretha also promised to pay him 500,000 South African rand, which was a lot of money, especially when he was in dire need of money. Jacques agreed to help her, but did not want to do it himself, so he decided to hire someone else to do it. After a while, Leon's business began to decline. All his chain stores began to close and suffered huge losses. Leon wanted to sell the hotel, but Suretha did not agree. At the end of September, Suretha and Jacques decided to start their plan. Jacques asked for half of the money in advance. However, due to financial problems, Suretha could only withdraw 100,000 rand and gave Jacques her diamond ring. With this money, Jacques hired a friend named Enrich Williams, who had a drug problem and was willing to kill for money. Enrich was worried that he could not handle a strong adult alone, so he brought in his friend Amantel Bareki to help him with the plan, and Enrich would share the proceeds with Amantel. Suretha gave the criminals her home address and told them where the safe was. She allowed them to take valuables from the house to make it look like a robbery. The only condition was that the dogs were not harmed, so they were released first. The neighbors noticed that the family's dogs were out and called her. This indicated that Enrich and Amantel were in the house. She then called her husband Leon to lure him into a trap. When he entered the house, one of the criminals hit him on the head with a baseball bat, while another attacked him with a knife, leaving him no chance to defend himself. Leon was stabbed 8 times and beaten with the bat several times. They then dumped his body in the swimming pool. After opening the safe, Amantel and Enrich found no cash, only securities, diamonds, and gold bars. They gave all the stolen goods to Jacques, who then gave them all to Suretha. The criminals chose not to take anything else from the house because they were worried about leaving too much evidence. They were relying solely on the large payment that Suretha had promised. Jacques was not allowed to be present at the crime scene. Suretha was worried that he might be identified on surveillance footage, especially since Toki had seen him several times and knew him as Suretha's friend at school. Jacques was only tasked with transferring the advance payment and instructing his accomplices to carry out the plan. Jacques was so worried about everything that he drove past Leon's house several times to make sure the criminals were ready and Leon was home. Jacques' car was caught on surveillance footage. While the license plate was unclear, the police took note of the car and its identifying features, eventually identifying the owner. Additionally, there was no money in the safe, and all of the family's accounts were frozen during the investigation. Suretha could not pay the hired criminals because selling the stolen goods, such as diamonds, gold bars, or securities, would reveal her involvement. She asked them to be patient, but Enrich and Amantel refused and began threatening Jacques. In desperation, Jacques does not receive the money he expected and feels guilty. Amantel and Enrich threaten him repeatedly, and he realizes that he faces the possibility of going to prison or suffering the same fate as Leon. He confides in his sister, who speaks to their mother, and together they convince Jacques to turn himself in. They advise him to expose the others involved in the scheme so that he can receive a lighter sentence. Jacques' real motive, in his full confession to the police, was that he believed he had done a noble deed, because he saw Léon as a man who had treated his wife badly, abused her, and threatened to kidnap their children. Suretha reported to the police about the will and property disputes between Léon and Toki. She wanted to imply that Toki was the culprit. However, the police decided to investigate Suretha thoroughly to find out her true intentions. During the investigation, it was discovered that Suretha and Léon had long since fallen out of love and were living apart. Suretha had a lover in Johannesburg, and she wanted to leave Léon to be with him. However, when she asked for a divorce, Léon firmly refused and threatened to take everything from her, including their children. It's difficult to determine Léon's true motivations, but it's likely he still cared for Suretha and wanted to repair their marriage. Meanwhile, Suretha had a plan to inherit his money and business after his death, which would allow her and her lover to live well. She also wants to removal of Toki by setting him up to become a killer, after which she will become the sole owner of the hotel, store, and restaurant after her mother-in-law passes away. Her plan can work if there is money in the safe and if she pays the hired criminals. In the spring of 2021, the trial and sentencing of all involved took place. The court considered each participant's role in this high-profile case. Jacques Van Vuren, who collaborated with the prosecution, provided detailed testimony and named his accomplices. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, eligible for parole after 5 years. The hired criminals, Enrich Williams and Amantal Barecki, were convicted of premeditated murder with added cruelty and robbery. They received life sentences with no chance of parole. Suretha Brits, who planned to kill her husband, convinced the court that she was the victim throughout their relationship. She claimed that Léon forced her to have sex when she was 14. A year later, after she became pregnant, she alleged that Léon forced her to have an abortion late in her pregnancy. Although their love faded, Léon refused to divorce her and threatened to take custody of their children. Suretha was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. The court took into account her remorse, her sincere confession, and her role as a mother to 3 young children. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Teresa Parker. Teresa Parker was born on September 9, 1965, to Claire and William. The family initially lived in San Diego, California. They later moved to a home in Lafayette, Georgia, where they settled permanently. Teresa had 5 siblings. She was the middle child. Her friendly and kind nature made her popular with all her relatives. In 1984, Teresa graduated from high school. Soon after, she married her first love. After a while, the couple separated in the early 90s. Teresa completed her training and became a switchboard operator for the city police department, quickly becoming a favorite of the police officers. One of those who loved her was Sam Park, born in 1956 in Lafayette. He had an older sister named Caroline and a younger brother named Kenneth. Sam had a close relationship with his father. Overall, he was a kind and intelligent person. In his spare time, he enjoyed exploring the outskirts of the city, hunting and fishing in the many freshwater bodies nearby. When Sam turned 18, he joined the military and later became a police officer. In the early 1980s, his younger brother Kenneth admired him and chose a similar career, serving in the Marine Corps before joining the police department. Inspired by Sam, Kenneth decided to go to law school. For Sam, becoming a police officer was a lifelong dream. During his career, he once saved a child from a burning building. When Teresa, a beautiful 20-year-old new switchboard operator, joined the police department, she caught the attention of many of the officers, including Sam. They quickly became friends, and before long, Sam asked her out. Their relationship blossomed and they became a couple. However, some of Teresa's relatives noticed that Sam sometimes had difficulty controlling his jokes and could easily get angry. Both Teresa and Sam had experienced failed relationships in the past. Teresa had been married once, while Sam had been married twice. He saw his new relationship with Teresa as an opportunity to start over. The couple married on September 11, 1993. Teresa, 28, married Sam Parker, 37, who had just been promoted to city police sergeant. Although the early years of their marriage were happy, their relationship began to deteriorate over time. They argued frequently, and the conflicts were severe. There were concerns that Sam might have violent tendencies. They later filed for divorce in August 2006, after nearly 13 years together. However, by the winter of 2006, they had reconciled and decided to continue their relationship. In March 2007, Teresa decided to end their relationship and went on vacation to Mexico without her husband. After returning from vacation, Teresa started looking for a new place to live in another city, while Sam would stay in their old house. She took a few days off to move and settle into her new home. The next day she moved her belongings to a new apartment. Then she visited her sister, Christina, who now lived near her. In the evening, Teresa left Christina's house. She drove her SUV back home. At around 10:30 a.m., she visited her good friend Rhonda's house. Although she had planned to go to her old house to move her belongings, she decided to stay longer to make sure that Sam had gone out and did not see her. She wanted to avoid any arguments. Rhonda was surprised that the once loving couple were now avoiding each other. Teresa revealed that Sam had always been short-tempered and aggressive, especially when he was drinking. They then ended their conversation. Rhonda went to bed while Teresa went to her ex-husband's house. The next morning at 6 a.m., Rhonda called her. Someone answered the phone, but there was silence on the other end. After a moment of silence, the call was disconnected. Rhonda tried to contact Teresa several more times but only got her voicemail. Rhonda called all the numbers Teresa had used, including her work number, but none of them worked. Concerned, Rhonda then contacted the police station to request a welfare check on Teresa, who did not return her calls. In the workplace, everyone was worried about Teresa's absence because she had never missed a shift before. A police team was sent to check on her at her ex-husband Sam's house. About half an hour after the call, around 6:30 a.m., the police arrived at Sam's house but got no response when they knocked on the door. They then searched the area, looking through the windows. They hoped to find Teresa's car to make sure she was okay, but only Sam's pickup truck was in the garage. The police then went to Teresa's new apartment, but no one answered the door there either, so they left without any information. The police later found Teresa's SUV near her ex-husband's house. No one saw her, even Sam tried calling her many times to ask about her. Initially, her relatives weren't too worried, thinking that Teresa was busy arranging her new apartment and might not have heard her phone while cleaning. However, it was unusual for her not to answer any calls, as that was not her typical behavior. The day passed without any updates on Teresa. Christina had a hunch that Teresa was in danger. Teresa's family then officially reported her missing to the sheriff. From the beginning, the police treated the case as a top priority. They sent several officers to talk to Teresa's ex-husband, Sam, to gather information about the events leading up to her disappearance. The Georgia Federal Bureau of Investigation became involved in the case. They had known about Teresa's family's domestic violence for years. On May 4, 2002, police were called by Teresa's neighbors to report that Sam was drunk and extremely aggressive. He had been drinking all day and was violent toward Teresa. The patrol officer observed a bruise on Teresa's face, indicating that she had recently been beaten. Despite this, she chose not to file charges against her husband. The next incident occurred on April 27, 2003, while they were on vacation in Florida. They were dining at a restaurant when her husband became intoxicated and began threatening to kill Teresa in front of others. She then attempted to leave the parking lot in her car. At that point, Sam pulled out his service weapon and fired several shots into the car. Even after the police arrived, he continued to verbally abuse her and denied firing his weapon. When Teresa accused him of something, Sam threatened to commit and end his own life. As a result, Sam was taken to a mental health facility in Florida, where he was held for 72 hours for evaluation. Doctors were particularly concerned about his disturbing statements, such as his claim that he knew how to dispose of a body without leaving a trace. Additionally, Sam had extensive experience concealing evidence. He is very familiar with the local area, including the least frequented locations. Kayla, Sam's ex-wife, described him as an alcoholic. When he drank, he became aggressive and violent. She recounted an incident where he smashed a glass on the floor in a fit of rage. Then grabbed her by the hair and dragged her through the broken pieces. He then chained her to the bed and only released her in the morning when he left for work. He also strangled Kayla and threatened her with a gun. She eventually escaped the abusive relationship by moving to another city to get away from him. The police were eager to solve Teresa's case quickly, especially since it involved 2 police officers, which would affect the reputation of the police department. They began by investigating Teresa's new apartment and Sam's house. When police arrived at Teresa's apartment, they found a note on the door from the courier saying that Teresa's order could not be delivered. Inside the house, everything appeared normal, with several cardboard boxes filled with Teresa's belongings. The police then searched Sam's home 5 times, which frustrated him, especially when they confiscated his hunting weapons for examination. Ultimately, the searches yielded no clues to Teresa's disappearance. All of her belongings, including her money and phone, were left behind. There was no activity on her bank accounts, so the possibility of her running away was rejected. At the end of March 2007, the entire Lafayette community was in confusion. Teresa had disappeared and no one knew where she was. This left everyone worried and many avoiding going out after dark. Those close to her suspected that Sam had something to do with it. However, Sam also expressed concern about Teresa's disappearance. He explained that she wanted to avoid divorce proceedings, so she ran away. However, this explanation did not seem reasonable. Hundreds of residents volunteered to assist police in searching for Teresa. Police made numerous attempts to locate her. Divers searched all local waters and areas such as underwater caves were explored with robotic cameras. Posters with Teresa's image were placed on billboards and flyers were distributed throughout the community. During the search, police found no sign of her. The situation was further complicated by the rugged terrain, which included dense forests, numerous small lakes, and mountains. The police questioned everyone who knew Teresa. Within a week, the police had interviewed over 100 people. During these interviews, it became clear that Sam had a volatile personality, was extremely jealous, and lost control when he drank. Meanwhile, Teresa was determined to save their marriage. She kept her husband's abuse a secret and did not share it with anyone, although her relatives suspected that there were serious problems in their family. In March 2007, everyone was relieved when Teresa decided to divorce her husband, and they supported her decision. However, Sam's family had a different view of him. They described him as cheerful and kind, and although he struggled with alcoholism. Sam's brother claimed that most of their conflicts were actually caused by Teresa's actions, rather than by Sam. Only Sam's younger sister spoke up, saying that he did have a quick temper and, unlike Teresa, he often escalated conflicts instead of stopping them. On March 25, police interviewed Sam. At the time, he was not considered a suspect. However, during the interview, he provided information that contradicted what police knew. Sam claimed that he saw Teresa's car in the parking lot when he went fishing that morning. This claim was dismissed by police, as they did not find her car at the house at the time. The car later appeared near the house, but no one witnessed how it got there. He also falsely claimed that he had not contacted Teresa, but police discovered several calls he had made to her that morning. While this may seem like a small lie, it aroused suspicion, leading the investigation to take a closer look at Sam. Sam presented a different version of events. He suggested that Teresa may have run off with her boyfriend, Elvis, whom she had allegedly met on a recent trip to Cancun, Mexico. To investigate this claim, police traveled to Mexico. They interviewed hundreds of people, including tour guides, hotel staff, and local residents. However, they found no clues or evidence to support the story, nor could they identify her boyfriend, Elvis, which led them to doubt his story. Despite growing concerns about the case, Sam continued to deny any involvement in the crime. On April 3, police arrested a man in connection with Teresa's disappearance. To the shock of many, it was not Sam who was arrested, but his colleague, Ben Chapin. Police kept the details of the arrest secret. Ben was eventually released and cleared of any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Sam was fired from the police department after 25 years of service due to his abusive behavior toward his ex-wives. He was permanently banned from returning to the force after his suspension. An internal investigation into Sam discovered explosives in his personal locker. The investigation into Teresa's case took months. Police were initially puzzled when Teresa's car returned to a parking lot near Sam's home. They discovered blood stains and signs of thorough cleaning in the car. Additionally, the trunk mat was missing. DNA analysis showed a sample belonged to Teresa, while they also found Sam's DNA in the same location. The police decided to arrest Sam. On February 4, 2008, nearly a year after Teresa's disappearance, police arrived at Sam's home, opened the door, and were arrested without resistance. The next day, he faced multiple charges, including murdering Teresa, invasion of privacy via computer, violation of public servant's oath, and invasion of citizen privacy. He was held without bail. Despite these charges, Sam maintained his innocence. Teresa's family, meanwhile, continued to insist that Sam was responsible for her disappearance, insisting that she feared him and did not want to return home. Despite the murder charges against Teresa, police have yet to find her body. Under state judicial practice, the chances of the prosecution winning the case are slim. Traditionally, few murderers have been convicted in cases where the victim's body is missing. As a result, the prosecution relied heavily on witness testimony, including Sam's ex-wives and Teresa's relatives. On August 17, 2009, in Walker County Superior Court, the prosecution alleged that Sam Parker had a history of violence against all of his ex-wives and was involved in an attempted murder. Sam had once confessed to his doctor that, as a police officer, he knew how to effectively hide a body. The prosecution detailed an incident that occurred when Teresa came to Sam's house to collect some of her belongings. They then got into an argument. During the argument, he killed Teresa, put her body in the trunk of her car. He then disposed of her body and carefully washed the car to remove any evidence. He then called his friend Ben and confessed that he had shot Teresa and planned to hide her body somewhere where it would never be discovered. He asked Ben to keep this conversation a secret. Ben shared his story just before the trial after reaching a deal with the prosecutor to drop all charges against him. Ben was supposed to testify against Sam. The prosecution said that during the time Teresa was missing, Sam suffered scratches on his hands and face. The prosecutor's office believes that these scratches were caused by Teresa in self-defense. Sam's attorney argued that he did not touch Teresa or her car. Teresa may have injured herself and then cleaned up the evidence and threw away an old rug before disappearing. The defense argued that all of the prosecution's evidence was circumstantial. Sam accused Teresa of having an affair. He even investigated her while she was on vacation and discovered that she had booked a double room, even though she was traveling alone. She also used a false name when booking the room. Sam suspected that Teresa had secretly met with his colleague, a police officer who had searched their home 5 times, but his colleague denied the allegations. Ultimately, the choice of the double room could simply have been because it had a large bed for comfort, or perhaps there were no single rooms available at the hotel. Sam still denies any involvement in the crime, arguing that there is no strong evidence to prove his involvement in the case or confirm Teresa's death. The jury was deadlocked and unable to reach a verdict, leading to the decision to retry. On December 3, 2009, 2.5 years after Teresa's disappearance, Sam Parker was convicted of murder, and he was also charged with obstructing and violating the oath of office of a civil servant. Sam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 5 years. Sam continued to maintain that he had nothing to do with Teresa's disappearance. After the trial, he requested a new trial, but his appeal was denied. 3.5 years after Teresa's mysterious disappearance, on September 20, 2010, 2 farmers found a human jawbone in a cornfield near the Chattooga River in Georgia, after a flood. A search party later discovered a nearly complete skeleton, and dental records confirmed that it belonged to Teresa. Her death was finally officially recognized. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head from a hole in the skull, not a gunshot wound. The discovery site was 100 kilometers from her home and on the route that Sam had taken to fish. Was confirmed by geolocation data. This led the police to conclude that Sam was responsible for Teresa's murder. Despite this evidence, Sam Parker maintained his innocence. He is currently serving a life sentence in prison. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jamie Haggard. David Haggard was born on February 23, 1974, in Woodinville, Washington, United States. He is the oldest son of Arthur Richard, an agricultural worker, and his biological mother is largely unknown. When he was 15, Arthur had 2 more children with another wife, daughters Stephanie and Jamie Haggard. Jamie, the youngest, was born on December 2, 1980, in King County, Washington. She was cherished and spoiled by her father, Arthur. He sought to fulfill her every wish from the moment she was born. Jamie and Stephanie grew up very close. They often dressed alike and did activities together, making them look like twin sisters, due to their small age difference. Jamie loved spending holidays by the water, whether at the sea or a nearby lake, and frequently asked Arthur to take them to Poplavino when the opportunity arose. David's life as the oldest child was far from peaceful and happy, unlike his father's and younger sister's lives. He moved to California, where he had to adapt to a new family that he barely knew. Feeling lonely and lacking parental affection, he turned to illegal substances in his teenage years. This marked the beginning of his downward spiral. He started with minor offenses, but things escalated. One day, David took a car without the owner's permission and was arrested for theft. He was released afterward, but did not learn from this experience and continued to engage in criminal behavior. Soon after, he was arrested twice for possessing illegal substances. His last arrest in 2005 resulted in a 2-year prison sentence, but he was paroled after a year due to his youth. The state decided to grant him a chance to clear his record on the condition that he remain offense-free for 5 years. If successful, he could have his 3 felony convictions in California erased, leaving him with a clean record. After all the incidents, he returned to Washington. Meanwhile, Jamie is entering her teenage years, and this has brought many changes for her. She became more independent and no longer looked up to her older sister Stephanie. She has big ambitions and sets high goals for the future. After graduating from high school, she dreamed of becoming a doctor. Ultimately, she chose to become a physician assistant. During this time, she met a young man named Jake, who came from Wooden Villa. They quickly became close, and their friendship gradually developed into love. In 2008, at just 19 years old, Jamie gave birth to twin girls, whom she named Dylan and Madison Rose. However, Jake and Jamie's relationship faced many challenges, and they split up shortly after their daughters were born. Despite the breakup, they maintained a friendly relationship and communicated regularly for the sake of their daughters, sharing custody without any issues. Jamie also successfully completed his studies and got a steady job at a medical center. David still had trouble during this time. He started using illegal drugs again, and his behavior became erratic and aggressive. As a result, he was arrested for public disorder conduct. Fortunately for David, at his hearing, he reached a plea deal with the prosecutor. The court decided to defer his sentencing again and placed him on probation, requiring him to undergo regular alcohol testing. He attended an anger management workshop and pledged not to repeat his illegal behavior in the future. Since his sentence was suspended, but not vacated, this means his previous crimes will still be on his record. Meanwhile, Jamie began a new relationship. Although her family didn't know much about the man she was dating, she called him her fiancé. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't go as she had hoped, and the romantic phase ended, leaving Jamie feeling upset. Seeking support, she decided to move in with a friend, which meant her children, the twins, stayed with their father, Jake. However, Jamie still made an effort to spend as much time as possible with her children to make up for her absence. David continued to engage in illegal activities. In 2016, he got into a fight with a friend over a car. Fueled by anger, he broke into his friend's house, where he stole several items, including a toaster and a refrigerator. Given his criminal background, he wanted to avoid being caught, so he set the house on fire. Initially, investigators couldn't determine the cause of the fire, but they discovered a crowbar at the entrance, suggesting that someone had forcibly entered the home. A few months later, in March, Jamie found a new place to live. She rented a house in Canmar, a small town on the shore of North Lake, Washington, just a 15-minute drive from Wooden Villa. David, who was homeless but still in touch with his family, approached Jamie. She kindly invited David, her half-brother, to stay with her for a few days. However, whether out of manipulation or convenience, David ended up moving in permanently. At first, his stay with she seemed to cause no inconvenience. Sharing the rent with him made her feel like she had gotten through a difficult period in her life. As time went on, the differences between Jamie and her half-brother David became more noticeable. She started to dislike his personality and habits, but they did share one common issue: both were using illegal drugs. To support her addiction, Jamie began stealing pills from her job at a local hospital to sell. Meanwhile, David began a relationship with a girl named Carly Scher, who frequently visited and sometimes stayed for long periods, which annoyed Jamie. Additionally, David also befriends a young man named Jason. Then, he invited Jason to move in with them, which upset Jamie. She didn't like Jason, so she treated him badly. She felt uncomfortable in her own home, and her relationship with David became increasingly strained. They argued frequently, and many of the arguments stemmed from David bringing Jason to live with them. The noise from David's parties even led neighbors to call the police on occasion. Whenever Jamie tried to address the situation, David reacted with anger and threatened violence. Over time, Jamie fell into depression. Her father, Arthur, who she often spoke with on the phone, noticed something was off with her, although she never shared the details of her troubled relationship with David. But Arthur could see she having problems. However, even if she had confided in Arthur, it likely wouldn't have changed anything, as their family viewed David as a kind and caring person. Jamie visited her friends and shared her feelings of fear and sadness. She confided that she was afraid of her half-brother David, particularly because of his violent behavior, and she lived in constant worry that he might attack her at night. On July 5, 2016, David stole a forklift from a construction site and used it to take equipment from there. After committing the theft, he set the vehicle on fire to cover his tracks. He was not alone. His accomplice, Carly, was with him. Additionally, he had taken over Jamie's house without her consent. He wanted to make changes that she did not approve of, leading to more arguments between them. During one heated argument, David violently struck Jamie, hitting her in the face and stomach, and demanded that she leave. Jason, a friend of David's who was present, did nothing to intervene and simply watched. Jamie left and spent the night at a friend's house. Afterward, he told Jason that Jamie was a burden and suggested that he should kill her. The next day, she returns home, which makes he feel even more disgusted, as he assumes he is the owner of the house. On June 9, 2016, Jamie spent the day at her father Arthur's house. Then, returning home, she planned to pack her belongings and leave for good. However, when she got home, she found her brother, David, with Carly. As soon as Carly saw Carly left the house, leaving her and he at home together. He, still angry, confronted which led to a heated argument. The situation became tense and led to a fight, as a result of which he overpowered and killed her. To dispose of Jamie's body, David dismembered it. Afterward, he attempted to burn some of the body parts on a spit in the backyard, which caught Carly's attention. She noticed him with a lit fire, which was unusual since he typically didn't cook outside. When she asked him about it, he said that before Jamie left, Jamie lit a fire. A few days later, David stole a car, packed a suitcase, and drove 20 minutes north to Snohomish. He then abandoned the suitcase containing Jamie's dismembered remains by the side of the road. As days went by without any news of Jamie, his daughter, Arthur grew increasingly worried, especially when David drove to his house to ask if he had heard anything about Jamie. It was unusual for she to go missing like this, which made Arthur suspect that something was wrong. He decided to reach out to some of Jamie's friends, but none of them had seen her or had any information. On June 17, 2016, Arthur went to Jamie's house, but she was not there either. In his desperation, he called over a police officer and reported his youngest daughter, Jamie, as missing. Almost a week after the crime occurred, David sent a message to Stephanie from an unknown number, pretending to be Jamie. His intention was to prevent her family from worrying, but this plan did not work well. Meanwhile, the police were already investigating and looking into bank transactions. They were suspicious because there hadn't been any activity taking place on Jamie's bank account or credit card. Meanwhile, Arthur focused on seeking help through social media, hoping someone would provide information about his daughter's whereabouts. 1 month after Jamie went missing, early in the morning, investigators went to David's home to execute a search warrant. This area quickly had many police officers appearing. David and Jason were questioned, but investigators found nothing suspicious about their statements or actions. Many witnesses were interviewed, and they all confirmed that Jamie and David had a troubled relationship. Additionally, their house is often active at night, which causes more concern. For hours, investigators searched the backyard hoping to find clues, but they found nothing. For Arthur, it was a relief that no body was discovered in the yard. He and the other family members still held hope that Jamie was alive. Meanwhile, David pretended to be concerned and helped with the search. However, Jamie's case was not the only one the police were investigating. In September, the investigation into a burned forklift led authorities to identify David as the prime suspect. During questioning, agents uncovered digital photographs of stolen items, including a refrigerator and a stove, which matched the model numbers of appliances stolen from a trailer. Carly Schur was interrogated by the police, and she revealed that David had confessed to her about the arson. Jason also confirmed to the agents that he saw David bringing the stolen appliances to his home. This information made David's situation much more complicated. He ultimately had no choice but to admit his guilt, leading to his arrest. David was then sentenced to 10 years and 2 months in prison for arson and second-degree burglary. A year after Jamie went missing, police received an anonymous tip suggesting they search around Jamie's house again. Investigators believed someone must have information about the case, so they quickly followed up on the tip. However, after digging for most of the day, they found nothing. Months passed, and nearly 2 years since Jamie went missing, when a public works crew in Snohomish County found a suitcase while picking up trash along the road. Inside the suitcase, wrapped in a red blanket, is the remains of a person. The workers immediately reported their discovery to the authorities. Detectives quickly determined that the person in the suitcase had been murdered. However, due to the advanced decomposition, it was challenging to identify the victim or confirm gender. The forensic team sent samples for lab testing, and after 2 months, it was confirmed that the remains belonged to Jamie Haggard. Evidence pointed to David as the main suspect. GPS data from a stolen car showed that he had driven near the location where Jamie's remains were found. Additionally, police discovered that the blanket used to wrap the remains belonged to Jason and had been stolen by David in an attempt to frame Jason. As a result, David was charged with murder. On Monday, October 28, 2019, David Haggard was charged with second-degree murder. The following day, a jury found him guilty, and his bail was set at $2 million. On Friday, December 5, 2019, David appeared in a King County courtroom for his sentencing hearing. Prosecutors asked for the maximum sentence of 22 years in prison. Meanwhile, the defense argued that the sentence should be lighter, stressing that David should not be punished so harshly. Throughout the trial, David maintained his innocence and claimed he was not the one who committed the crime. He criticized the justice system for punishing innocent people and expressed his love for his younger sister Jamie. He insisting he could never harm her. When Stephanie spoke emotionally about her sister Jamie in court, David broke down in tears. The senior assistant prosecutor said that David had put Jamie's family, which was also his family, through pain for nearly 2 years by keeping the truth about her death from them. Ultimately, David was sentenced to 15 years in prison, followed by 3 years of community supervision, during which he would receive evaluation and treatment for his addictions. During this time, Jamie's children, Dylan and Madison Rose, mistakenly believe that their mother's absence is due to their father, Jake, not allowing them to contact her. Fortunately, Jake remarried, and his new wife adopted the girls, Dylan Va Madison, raising them as her own. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Larry Holman. A small town, Festus, Missouri, USA, with a population of about 10,000, is a religious community. Almost all the local residents are people of faith, very calm and friendly people. It is a quiet place where everyone knows each other very well and keeps in touch. However, sometimes it is in such quiet towns that serious crimes occur. On November 21, 2000, the local police department received a call from a witness. She reported hearing gunshots near a factory and saw a suspicious vehicle, but she was too afraid to approach it. She believed that the man in the vehicle was injured. The police quickly went to the reported location. A few hundred meters away, they spotted a pickup truck in a field. From a distance, it looked like the truck had a problem because the hazard lights were flashing. As the officers got closer, they noticed the windshield was broken and a man slumped over the wheel. He showed no signs of life, and his foot was still on the brake pedal. On the floor, there was an unfinished soda can, which likely fell out of the man's hand after he was murdered. There was a large hole in his skull from a bullet that had penetrated and even broken the windshield. It appeared that the murder had occurred just minutes earlier, as the blood was still fresh and running down the floor of the truck. The officers quickly checked and found the victim's face was severely disfigured. Police officer Randy, who arrived at the scene of the crime. Randy said he had worked with the victim before, and the victim was Larry Holman. He also knew Larry's wife Tammy and their 2 children. When Randy called, he did not tell Tammy that her husband was dead, so she initially thought Larry was just injured and had come to the scene. When she realized he was dead, she collapsed with grief and began to cry. Larry and Tammy met at church. Although she was much younger, Larry fell deeply in love with her and pursued her. At the time, Tammy was 16 years old, and Larry was 28. He was divorced and had a daughter from a previous marriage. After Tammy graduated from college, their romantic relationship began. Friends and family described their relationship as genuine and loving. Larry's co-workers noted that he even kept a picture of his wife in his lunchbox so he could see her whenever he took a break from work. They married and had 2 children, Josh and Natalie, and their family was very religious. Larry was known to be a kind person. He had no criminal record or connections to the criminal world, making it unclear who might want to harm him. An analysis of the car was conducted, and the bullet's trajectory was reconstructed. It was determined that the shot was fired from a significant distance using a powerful cartridge. The bullet entered through the rear side window, traveled diagonally through the headrest, and struck Larry in the back of the head. After sustaining the head injury, Larry's leg remained on the brake pedal, causing the car to stop. Severe injuries cause immediate death. It was assumed that an unfortunate hunter had done it by accident. However, further investigation revealed that the shot did not come from the woods, raising questions about the vehicle's movement. Although the braking distance was determined, it was unclear whether Larry stopped before or after he was injured. Additionally, the first officers on the scene noted that the car's headlights were off, suggesting that the vehicle could not have been moving when the injury occurred. They later confirmed that Larry may have parked near the factory, and the murder was intentional. Officer Randy believed that Larry was the target of a planned attack, but the other officers were not supportive of the idea because the area was safe and had never had a similar incident before. In fact, there had been no murders in decades, making it hard to believe that anyone would harm a good man like Larry. The investigation began by interviewing everyone who knew the Larrys, starting with neighbors and relatives. The neighbor who lived across the street from Larry said he had seen Larry at church just before the murders, and that they had both attended church services. The neighbor had heard that Larry was going through a hard time and had quit his job. The neighbor noticed that Larry seemed nervous, but Larry brushed off any concerns with jokes. The neighbor reported an incident when he and Larry were hunting in the woods. At some point, Larry and the neighbor became separated in the woods. Moments later, Larry called his neighbor and reported that he was injured and gave his coordinates. The neighbor quickly ran to help him. As he walked through the woods, he noticed a stranger wearing camouflage walking in the opposite direction. In Missouri, hunters are required to wear camouflage when hunting with a firearm, so this did not seem unusual. When the neighbor found Larry, he discovered that Larry was okay, as the bullet only grazed his head by a few inches. The neighbor concluded that the hunter was inexperienced and did not know how to use a gun properly. Larry later said he did not see the shooter, suggesting that the shooting may have been accidental. There were many people out hunting at the time. It is not uncommon for a hunter to mistakenly identify another person as prey, resulting in injury or even death each year. However, Randy believes the shooting was not an accident. Unfortunately, Larry's neighbor was unable to provide a detailed description of the hunter he encountered. Police then interviewed the woman, named Helen, who called the police to report the incident. Police spoke to her to see if she had noticed anything unusual on the day of the murder. According to Helene, just before she called the police, a car had pulled up near her house. A man got out, dressed in camouflage, pulled out a large shotgun, and walked along the railroad tracks toward the woods. He did not cross the tracks, however, which was odd, since hunters usually walk straight into the woods. Helen said that she had no idea what had happened afterward. Police investigated Larry's background in the hope of finding clues to the killer. However, they discovered that he was a calm man with no criminal record and a devoted husband. He had worked at the factory for many years, but had recently decided to quit and was looking for work. Everyone who knew Larry described him as a good person who would never be involved in any crime. The community was small and tight-knit, which added to their concerns. The motive behind the crime is unclear, leaving locals fearing that a madman may have committed the crime and is on the loose. Public pressure mounted on the police to quickly apprehend the suspect. Meanwhile, rumors began to spread throughout the city. Many of the rumors cast a negative light on Larry's wife, Tammy. They said she was too young for Larry. They pointed out that she wore revealing clothes behind her husband's back and frequently visited nightclubs and bars while he was at work. Strange cars were also seen near her home at night. However, there were reports that Tammy spent time with her children and seemed to be a good wife. But rumors began to spread that she was cheating on her husband and that her lovers were visiting her frequently. Therefore, all the young people who visited Tammy while Larry was away became suspects. If she was indeed unfaithful, any of her lovers could have had a motive for the attack. A neighbor gave the police important information. She said that her children were playing with Tammy's children. A few days after Larry's death, when she went to pick up the children, she noticed a strange man in the house. He acted as if he were the host. The neighbor found the man's behavior very unusual, especially since Larry had just passed away. When the neighbor questioned, Tammy explained that the man was just an old-school friend who wanted to support her during this difficult time. This attracted the attention of the police, and they decided to identify him. The police discovered that the man was Tim Smith. The police discovered that Tim had moved in with Tammy the day after Larry died. He quickly took over Larry's space and used his belongings without hesitation. It was clear that Larry's children were unhappy with the situation and did not like having strangers in their home. The police decided to look into Tim's criminal history, suspecting that he might have had a motive for committing the crime. Surprisingly, the police did not find any serious issues on his record. The most serious offenses on his record were a few traffic violations. Tim and Tammy were high school classmates and dated for a while, but they broke up after graduation. However, it seemed unusual that Tim would quickly go from former classmates to roommates living in Tammy's house. Tim was then brought to the police station for questioning. At the police station, Tim denied any involvement in Larry's death, but claimed that he had moved in with Tammy shortly after her husband's death. He claimed that before that, He had only visited occasionally and slept over a few times. At the beginning of the questioning, he claimed to be Tammy's boyfriend. Furthermore, he admitted that he had been her lover for a long time. Tammy had never been faithful to Larry and had had several affairs. She had planned to leave her husband to marry Tim. Witnesses reported that Tammy acted strangely after Larry died. At the funeral, she wore a revealing outfit and seemed nonchalant throughout the funeral. She seemed cheerful and spent a lot of time on the phone. One of Larry's sisters heard that during these calls, Tammy was talking to other men. Rumors began to spread that Tammy was not only having affairs with Tim Smith, but with many others. A witness reported that Tammy was sunbathing in a revealing bikini in front of her house. He stopped to say hello and compliment her, leading to a relationship. But he was much younger than Tammy, and their relationship quickly ended. However, police investigated and found a third man, Charlie Miller, who was often mentioned. According to Larry's eldest son from his first marriage, Charlie worked at a nearby grocery store. After dropping her daughter and son off at school, Tammy would go to the park to meet Charlie, where they spent many hours together. Several of Charlie's friends confirmed that Charlie had a romantic relationship with Tammy. They first met when Charlie worked as a contractor for Larry. Charlie was married at the time and had a close friendship with Larry. While working on renovations at Larry's house, Charlie met Tammy, who was very flirtatious. Their teasing soon turned into a more intimate relationship while Larry was away. Tammy eventually told her husband about the affair. However, he chose not to divorce her and instead tried to save their marriage. He asked Charlie to end his relationship with Tammy. The number of suspects continued to grow. Even if Tammy did not directly kill her husband, she could still be considered the mastermind of the crime. She had been having affairs with multiple people, and each had a motive for the murder. Police discovered text messages on Tammy's phone that showed she was having affairs with Tim Smith and Charlie Miller at the same time. To investigate further, police questioned Tammy. She revealed that shortly before Larry died, Tom Rumble had started stalking her. She provided evidence through messages he sent her on a messaging app. She described him as a dangerous man. Just before Larry died, Tom began writing letters to Tammy. He expressed his love for her, his desire to have children, and his willingness to marry her. However, Tammy felt uncomfortable and tried to distance herself from him because of his obsessive behavior. She suspected that he might be involved in her husband's murder. Tammy provided the police with evidence of their correspondence. Even though her husband had died and she was in a relationship with Tim Smith, Tom's harassment continued. Tammy felt trapped and didn't know how to get Tom to stop. By the time the police were notified, Tom was still sending Tammy letters that she wasn't responding to. In fact, she had sought a restraining order against him in court. When the police spoke to Tom, he claimed to have genuine feelings for Tammy, but dismissed her request for a restraining order as an overreaction. He didn't consider himself a threat. He said that he had only come to give her a bouquet of flowers that day and did not want to scare Tammy. However, his behavior was quite suspicious, and he accidentally revealed that he had been to Larry's house many times, as he knew the layout of the house very well. This suggested that he had visited Tammy while her husband was away. After the autopsy, the medical examiner confirmed that Larry had been killed with a large caliber gun, specifically a .243 caliber rifle, which is the standard deer hunting rifle, and a correspondingly weighted bullet was used. As police continued their investigation, they discovered that shortly before the murder, Charlie, who was working as a contractor at the time, had talked to Larry about hunting. During a subsequent visit, Charlie showed Larry his .243 caliber rifle. Police specifically noted that Larry was killed with a .243 caliber rifle, which was associated with Charlie Miller. Additionally, an anonymous informant told police that Tammy's boyfriend owned a .243 caliber rifle. Charlie's gun was taken for testing for Fortunately, the police found a bullet near Larry's car that matched the gun. In Larry's death, a love triangle was involved. The police learned that Charlie and Larry had been close friends for a long time. Police suspected Charlie of the murder because he owned a car that matched the description of a woman who lived near the railroad tracks. Although she did not speak directly to the driver, she saw him clearly. When shown a photo, she was able to identify Charlie. After examining Charlie's weapon, the police confirmed that Larry had been killed with Charlie's rifle. On January 9, 2001, the police went to Charlie's house to arrest him and inform him of his rights. Charlie later confessed to killing Larry. He was arrested and taken to the police station. Tim Smith and Tom Rumble were cleared of any involvement in the murder. After his arrest, he testified that he drove to the house where Tammy lived near the railroad tracks, got his rifle and wore camouflage that day. He then walked along the tracks, retracing the route he had taken through the woods and fields that morning. The only question that remains is how did he know where Larry would be at that time? Charlie confessed that Tammy had been urging him to take action. She expressed her suffering due to her husband's cruelty, and Charlie felt compelled to rescue her from this oppressive situation. This was not the first time Charlie had targeted Larry. During a hunting trip in the forest, he had previously fired a shot that narrowly missed Larry's head. It was evident that this was intentional, as Tammy had informed Charlie about her husband's whereabouts, making it easy for him to find Larry in the woods. After this initial attempt, Tammy spoke with Charlie, who tried to convince her to leave Larry and be with him instead. Despite this conversation, she continued to provoke Charlie, believing that a second attempt on Larry's life would succeed, especially with Larry's upcoming marriage putting pressure on Charlie, who was also a close friend of Larry. Why didn't Tammy divorce her husband if she wasn't happy in her marriage? The answer is simple. She and Charlie didn't want a divorce because they wanted to avoid dividing assets and child custody. Additionally, they were motivated by the prospect of benefiting from Larry's life insurance policy. Just before these events, Larry had purchased a $1 million insurance policy. Tammy saw this as a great opportunity, but then she found out that it wasn't a life insurance policy, but an employer protection policy. Therefore, Tammy could only claim $150,000. Now that Tammy is under interrogation, she firmly maintains that she did not kill her husband and had nothing to do with his death. She begins to blame Charlie for everything, believing that her lover had developed strong feelings for her due to their brief relationship. She believes that Charlie sees Larry as the only obstacle to their happiness, so he decides to get rid of Larry. Charlie had a clear motive for the murder. During his trial, Charlie Miller, 49, pleaded guilty again to the murder. He argued that he was in emotional distress and was on medication at the time of the crime, which affected his understanding of his actions. As part of a plea agreement, Charlie was sentenced to 25 years in prison and is scheduled to be released in 2028. Throughout the trial, Tammy denied any involvement in the crimes. Her attorney continued to support her testimony. The prosecutor's office presented evidence, including numerous phone calls and text messages involving Charlie. Based on this evidence, it was shown that Tammy was a deceitful and cunning criminal who manipulated multiple men at once. The prosecution presented indirect evidence of her involvement through various telephone conversations that took place on the day of the murder. She was in frequent contact with Charlie, who also implicating her while discussing the execution of the order. However, the prosecutor's chances of winning at trial were uncertain. As a result, the prosecution proposed a deal to Tammy. 30-year-old Tammy Holman was sentenced to 7 years in prison, but she maintained her innocence, claiming that her confession was coerced. In 2009, she was released and returned to Festus.